moment. Here's that sprint again. Magnus Bagstedt getting the lead there. Just pipping on the line, DiBiase, the race leader. But I think, Paul, that will still keep him in front by a few seconds.
It'll keep him in front by a reduced advantage, almost certainly there, and that was a very good sprint by Magnus Bagstedt. There's confirmation of the result of the Intergiro there, Phil, at Piove di Sacco. Lelikin and Marini, well, they were a long way ahead of the rest, and Magnus Bagstedt slowly but surely clawing his way towards the lead in the Intergiro competition. The rain is starting to come down just a little bit, and in fact it will cool the riders in the latter part of the afternoon here. We're looking here at Mirko Marini. He, in fact, is not much of a threat at all in the overall classification. Many people have written in on the email, Phil, asking how is it possible for guys to win stages and not be the leader of the bike race overall? Well, to put it into perspective, the two men who are leading the race at the moment, although they're leading the race by 11 minutes, they're actually both of them 1 hour, 13 minutes behind Gilberto Simoni in the overall classification. It's all a question of keeping your time added up throughout the race to a minimum, and that's why Gilberto Simoni is the man who is leading the race in the pink jersey at the moment.
That's right, 1 hour 13 minutes. It's the sort of time gaps Bob Roll would have had by this stage of the Giro, right, Bob?
To the reverse direction, yes, absolutely. At the other end of the classification, I could never consistently ride so close to the front of the bike race. I always had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 20 bad days in a 21-day race, and consequently, I was always suffering at the back of the peloton. It looks like the Mercatoni Uno riders here now. It's hard to tell if they're coming up at the rear or at the front of the bike race, but Pantani's having a great Giro so far. There we see Gilberto Simoni. He has a handy little vest there covering up his beautiful pink jersey that was so hard fought and hard won yesterday. A fabulous stage the organizers put in, one of the most brutal, difficult stages of this year's edition. There's no rhythm because the climbs, although very difficult, they're quite short, and they come into a very, very frequent succession, and Simoni did a great ride yesterday.
Well, Bob, that was a pretty brave move as well, wasn't it, by Gilberto Simoni, because theoretically he should have been caught before the finish, but what happened was the pink jersey on the shoulders of Stefano Garzelli. He didn't have any friends at all in what was really a fairly large group, almost 30 riders towards the end. He actually admits that the only person who really helped him on the run in towards the finish was Francesco Casagrande, so rather a strange tactical manoeuvre by Simoni and a risk to go 25 miles out from the finish.
I mean, it's an unbelievable attack he put in, reminiscent of the great champions of cycling. A rider like Bernard Hinault, we could see him doing that frequently in the Tours, taking off a long time before the finish, catching the riders by surprise on many of occasions, and having enough power to stay away to the finish. You don't often see that in a bike race. Actually, the route was pioneered, found by local rider and RAI commentator who I race with a lot, Davide Cassani. So he asked the organizers to put in a especially difficult route. He's from this area. He knew all those roads very well and put in an incredibly grisly, vicious stage. And Gilberto Simoni did not disappoint the organizers. He went on out on a fantastic raid.
Phil, I find it always pretty funny when the ex-riders always design some of the most difficult courses which they probably wouldn't have enjoyed themselves.
No, they're absolute sadists. They'd be the first to criticise a tough route, and then as soon as they become on the other side of the fence, they go out and say, let's make the riders suffer, and they come up with a great route.
Well, I can corroborate that, absolutely. I raced against Francesco Moser. He loved the flat, fast stages, didn't like the mountains so much, became the technical director in 1988 and put in the most brutal Giro d'Italia in history up to that point. We climbed every hill in the country, the ones that he, in fact, asked the organizers to go around on the flatlands and in the valleys, and we really suffered. And every morning we cursed him as he sat in the director's car in front of the race. Andy Hampson, however, it benefited him, and he won that Giro d'Italia. It was a fantastic race.
Andy enjoying these live pictures, I hope, back in Boulder, Colorado. The American to have won the Giro d'Italia last year, don't forget. Tyler Hamilton came close, he finished second. Well, these are the two riders, Mirko Marini and Sergei Lelikin, both on the same Tenax team, as Paul has said. They are 1 hour 13 minutes behind the race lead, as we've just arrived here now at the feeding station, where the riders are taking a little bit of time out, and then they'll get back in the peloton. You can't, if you stop, it's at your own risk, of course, because you've got to catch up. They don't wait for you. as the gap here will come up to us shortly, but the last gap we got was 10 minutes and 30 seconds to these two leaders. There's confirmation again of the Inter-Giro won by Lelikin. It wasn't a sprint, I can assure you, between these two. They've no interest in this competition, but Bagstead certainly has, and that third place has closed the gap right up now on the race leader of the Inter-Giro, which is Moreno Di Biasi. He's just a few seconds off snatching that light blue leader's jersey. He might do that tomorrow, but tomorrow is one of those horrible days for the non-climbers. We climb one of the biggest mountains of the race to the finish line tomorrow. That's going to be a real toughie, the Zoncolan. Well, as you can see, the rain getting a little bit heavier now as we start to course up towards the beautiful city of Venice. The race finishing just outside of that city at Sandona. It's a long stage. There's not a hill in sight. They can expect to keep on the flat roads. And these boys, I think, Bob, we've seen catches of the peloton there. They're getting themselves organised a little bit earlier than normal because that's a big time gap they've given these two.
Well, they're right on the point where there's enough time to stay away to the finish. They had over 10 minutes with 100 Ks to go, and in the old days it was 1 minute per 10 kilometers advantage was on the limit of staying away to the end. Nowadays, with the team sprinters so well organized, you need more like 2 minutes per 10 Ks, twice as much time to stay away. This is a good move by the Tenax team, but they're going to be chased all the way to the line by Fossa Bortolo and Mario Cipollini's guys from the Domina Vacanze team. It's a tremendous amount of publicity for Tenax, even though they still are in for a chance with the stage win. But once these riders start going down the highway flat out, it's going to be very hard to stay away to the finish.
Well, there's a point, you know, we've got the small team of Tenax, which will not be accepted in any other of the major races around the world this year, but this is an Italian race, and the Italians have allowed this lowly class team into the race. And sometimes, you know, that might counter the argument for the French not allowing the Italian team of Cipollini into their tour, because the Italians and the Spanish tend to always give priority to national professional teams before they look abroad, and the French now are being accused of doing the same thing and leaving out in the latest wildcard selections for the Tour de France Mario Cipollini, the Italian world champion. Anyway, we'll take a break. It looks as though we're settling down to a good day of action. Watch out though, if we can't have any hills, then we have lightning. There's no easy days in this event. We'll take a break. The two leaders, Bob, just taking up on that point of the small team like Tenax getting a ride in this race, but we're looking at the Tour de France in July and still no Cipollini.
So complicated, the situation. I mean, at the end of the day, why can't Domina Vacanze spend some money on some guys with points, on UCI points, and get the automatic selection? Jean-Marie Leblanc has lorded over the Tour de France now for over 10 years. He's brought a really national event into the eye of the world at large. So this one sort of odd situation with Cipollini's team, I think it might have long-term repercussions in Jean-Marie Leblanc's relationship with the public in general about the Tour de France. He's done a great job organizing that race. He's really committed to French cycling also on a grassroots level. So he knows that the sponsors need to have the exposure of their teams being in their national race. So he's under a lot of pressure to put the French teams in the race. Mario Cipollini's team, I think, deserve a place in the Tour de France. There's 4 slots given. There's the 3 French teams are not in the top group either. So he's obliged to pick them. Euskaltel Euskadi, the Basque team, I think are a very good team, but not at the same level of Cipollini. So I don't think to compare Cipollini's experiences, hopefully getting into the Tour, should be compared against the French teams and the favoritism, just like you said, that the French reserve for their home teams. But Domina Vacanze most certainly should have been in the race. And at the end of the day, Cipollini, I think, will be in the race because Team Coast has so many problems getting their money situation organized, and that leaves Jan Ullrich out in limbo somewhere. But at this point in the proceedings, maybe Cipollini needs to get the nod rather than Jan Ullrich. And Cipollini has promised to race to the finish in Paris, try to get all the way there. So at this point, it's difficult to understand why Jean-Marie Leblanc needs to have Cipollini not in his bike race.
Now, Cipollini still got that sort of a wild card chance. If Ulrich's team doesn't pull it together, he might get the nod, but I don't think he'll come, will he?
Well, he's a very proud bike rider. He actually said that if his team was asked to come at the last moment and the team obliged him to go, he would go and take part in the Tour de France, but he certainly would not go with joy in his heart. I think he would like to go at the end of the day, and there's still the possibility that Cipollini could come in, because only 21 teams have been selected so far, and there's a maximum 22. Although, Phil, in the past, the French bend the rules occasionally to their own advantage, and they have had 23 teams take part, so there's always a possibility that in the month of June, if the team surrounding Jan Ullrich right now gets all their documentation into place, we could see Jan Ullrich and Mario Cipollini's team invited to take part.
I must say, Bob, I've always been in favour of reducing the 9-man teams to 8. Then you could get 3 more teams in the race, but the riders don't like that.
Well, the big bosses of the peloton, a guy like Lance Armstrong, wants to have a solid team of 9 riders. If a couple of riders get sick or crash out, then he's way down on his number of domestiques to help him through the flat stages before he can turn his magic in the mountain. So there are arguments on both sides. If all the teams have 8 riders, then it's fair, you know, and I think you're absolutely right, Phil. I agree. If all the teams have the same number of riders, whether it be 8, 9, or sometimes 10 in the old days, I don't know. It's a very complicated situation. It's enjoyable to talk about, though.
Yeah, Bob, I've got a quick question, because you said if Mario Cipollini wants to get into the Tour de France, why doesn't his team go out and buy some more expensive riders with points? In that case, why don't we oblige the French teams to do that? I think that's not a bad little point there.
Yes, absolutely. If the French riders don't want to do a disservice in the long run, at this point, they don't have to pay the best riders. They know they're going to get into the Tour automatically. So I think competitively, the Tour organizers are, in the long run, doing a disservice to their own sport.
Well, I can tell you, whatever happens, Jean-Marie Leblanc, the race director of the Tour de France, will never be on the winning side. If he lets in the Italians, then his own country, France, will complain. And that's the way it is when you organise the biggest bike race in the world. 2 men still clear. There's the latest gap for you. 8 minutes 35 seconds. The charge is on. We'll just take another short break. And welcome back to the rather wet road today of the Giro d'Italia. We're on the 11th day of this 21-day race, and the riders occupied today trying to chase a break of 2 men. But just about in the last 70 kilometres of the stage, and those 2 leaders, Mirko Marini, Sergei Lelekin, a Russian and an Italian, both on the same Italian Tenex team, and they've been in the lead really since the 35th kilometre. The latest check, Bob, 7:28. It is closing down quite quickly now.
Yes, they've seemed to reach the point in the race where the peloton is charged up and the breakaway has just hit the wall, as they say, run out of energy, and the gap is plummeting precipitously. I think we're going to see a huge bunch finish. When this rain comes down, the roads are a little bit slick. Luckily, it hasn't started falling just before they got to the finishing town. It's fallen, and it'll be coming down for an hour, hour and a half before the stage gets there. And when the rain starts to fall here in this part of Italy, when it doesn't rain that often, the roads initially are so slick, it's crazy. The rain will have a chance to fall a little bit. The oil that comes up through the street pavement will have a chance to be washed away. It should be a fairly safe sprint, but there is a tight corner just before the finish line.
Well, we're just going through the town of Dolo, which is 153 kilometres covered, so just outside of 70 kilometres to go to the finish. In fact, once again, there's a tricky little finishing circuit. The riders will cross the line and face 5.8 kilometres before they get back to the finish, but they do get a chance to see the majority of the run-in because they come into that circuit with about 2/3 of it to go. It's around about 10 kilometres to go, Phil, when they enter the finishing circuit. And I think the magnificent thing that we get out of this coverage of the Giro d'Italia is not only do we get some fabulous bike riding, but we get to see some of the most unbelievable real estate that Italy has to offer.
Yes, this is a very, very plush part of this beautiful country. We're on the eastern seaboard now, running right up the coast. We'll see this here a bit later on. It's not too welcoming today because there's a lot of thunder in the sky over the east, and it looks as though it's going to get wetter and wetter towards the finish. Now, a couple of days ago, you may remember we had a small circuit finish. We were entertained to a wonderful boxing match between the sprinters trying to grab Cipollini's wheels. As a result of that, one of the riders, Nasdux, was thrown out of the race for fighting. Many felt that Pataki should have been thrown out as well. They felt it was one rule for the Italians and one rule for the foreign riders in the event. Either way, we have a tight finish again today.
Well, the circuit is not quite as dangerous as it was the other day. The roads are fairly large, wide boulevards, although there is a pretty tricky corner at around about 150 metres to go. But the thing is, it's Mario Cipollini who sets up the sprint for the whole of the peloton, isn't it, Bob? His team take the responsibility of setting the pacemaking, and all of the sprinters, McEwen, Pataki and Naudus a few days ago, they want to get into the slipstream of Mario Cipollini. Now, that's a tough order, because he's the man who takes the whole responsibility of the race in the last few kilometres, and they want to use his impetus.
Yes, absolutely. We're often asked, why doesn't a team like Lotto set up their own train for Robbie McEwen? But the Domino Vacanze boys, so well trained, so well drilled in the sprints, and they have such good morale because they know they have the best sprinter in the world on their wheel, so it's almost impossible to get inside or even next to the Cipollini train. So you have a big queue behind him, and it's a war for his wheel, because the other sprinters know that if they're going to have a chance to win, they got to be on Cipollini's wheel. So they're always, all the time, fighting for Cipollini's wheel. That gives him a little bit of an advantage as well, because he has a relatively trouble-free ride in the slipstream of Giovanni Lombardi, while just behind him is an absolute war going on. And it seemed like Pataki and Naudus were fist-fighting more than they were concentrating on the sprint. Cipollini won. You got to hand it to him on that, though. You can't take anything away from him and his team, Domino Vacanze. Fantastic images we get from the helicopter of not just the sprint itself, but all of the kilometers leading up to it.
Well, Phil, in fact, Mario Cipollini the other day was asked, well, aren't you worried about the fact that Robbie McEwen and Alessandro Pataki are fighting for your wheel? And he just responded, well, you know, when Mario Cipollini's on fine form, he doesn't really care who's behind him.
Yeah, absolutely right. Very few people, when Mario's on form, ever get up alongside him in a big sprint. We had a brief glimpse there of the Tenax team. It's led by Cristiano Frattini and Martin Bastia from Slovenia. There we are. Some good names here, but it's a smaller team, but there are quality bike riders in this team, and Zanetti at the end there as well. Pozzi, a star of the future, 177, I'm sure of that. He's one of the young boys. Had a nasty tumble a few days ago in the mountains, and he's now recovering in the pack here. Hopefully he'll come back into our camera screens when we get back into the hills. They start tomorrow with a vengeance, by the way. We have a superb finish tomorrow up a very, very cruel, steep mountain.
Francesco Casagrande, in fact, saying that he was feeling a lot better than he was after his first attempt at the mountains at Terminillo, and in fact he is going to come out tomorrow and fight, I think, to try and pull himself a little bit higher up in the overall classification. He has slipped down. We get a chance here to see the comfortable ride today of Gilberto Simoni. You can just see the pink sleeves there of the Maglia Rossa. He's covered with a raincoat today to keep himself nice and warm on what is rather a strange weather pattern. It was expected to be fairly clear in the latter part of the afternoon, but this small little sea mist has come in, Bob, and it really does tend to chill the ardours of many of the men in the main peloton.
Well, when you've been racing in the heat for so long, in the dry weather and the beautiful sunshine, you come up on a stage that's a little bit cooler and it's actually raining, seeps into the muscles, and here's a corner going around some of the Brenta River canals there. Absolutely gorgeous part of Italy. We've got some rain on the course today. Let's not see if that's falling as snow up on the top of the Zone Colon. Casagrande and Simoni and Garzelli all tried to train on that mountain. It's an unknown mountain in the Giro d'Italia. None of them were able to do it because the snow, even to the spring, was still so deep they couldn't ride the last few kilometers. And there are pitches in the last couple of Ks upwards of 22% grade. So we're going to see an absolutely grisly stage tomorrow.
Yes, whatever you do, make sure you're watching with us tomorrow when we go live to the top of that mountain. It's going to be quite something to see. 174 is Lelekin, so therefore 176 must be Marini. These two riders breaking away early on today, 175 are these riders breaking away after 35 kilometres. They're still clear, but they've had a lead of almost 14 minutes, but it's now actually coming back steadily.
Coming back very steadily. The last time check we got was just outside of 6 minutes, and these two men, Phil, as we said earlier, absolutely no threat at all in the overall classification. The best placed rider, in fact, is Sergei Lelekin. He's 142nd in the overall classification. Both of these riders have been professional for a reasonable amount of time. Lelekin turned professional in 1999. His teammate in this breakaway right now, Marini, he turned professional in the year 2000, but neither of them have a victory to their credit so far.
Well, we're looking down a long straight road there. This is a little switch now to the finish at Sandona, where they're waiting for the passage of the wet. We're about 63 kilometres for the leaders from the finishing line, but of course we do get there for a finishing circuit as well. Dangerous moments for the peloton. The spray is rather unpleasant, and you've got to keep your wits about you as the Giro d'Italia continues. We're on stage 11. Back in a moment. Welcome back. It's stage 11 as we make our way to Sandona today, just on the outskirts of Venice. 222 kilometres, totally flat road, and we're 61 kilometres from the finish. Two men are clear since the 35th kilometre today. Mirko Marini and Sergei Lelekin, both of the 10X team, and the gap is continuing to fall now, just over 6.5 minutes. Now, yesterday, Paul, we saw that nasty-looking crash to the English rider Charlie Wagelius, and he was quite pained, and he slipped from his 24th overall. He lost 17 minutes yesterday. He's now 60th.
Well, rather a sad day for Charlie Wagelius yesterday, because I thought he had the possibility of finishing in the top 20 overall in the Giro d'Italia, because he was riding very well. He was actually in the group of Stefano Garzelli. Now, in the Gazzetta dello Sport, the newspaper of the race organisation, every day they have a competition for the kangaroo, who's the person who jumps up so many places in the overall classification, and Le Gambarini, or the prawn, who drops down the most number of places. And in fact, yesterday that was given to Charlie Wagelius, who started the day in 24th place and slipped down to 60th overall, having lost more than a quarter of an hour. But it is rather sad for Charlie. He's fortunate, I think, that today is a flat stage, because in fact he's injured his hip just at the back of his spine there, and he needs a day like this, Bob, doesn't he, to try and get himself back into form, because I thought at a first attempt at the Giro he was doing a pretty good ride.
He was doing a great ride, and he was right in there in the finale of the bike race on a stage that was very hard. Wagelius riding good. The stage had already split out. Aitor Gonzalez, Julio Perez, and Pietro Cauchioli, surprisingly enough. Our third place finisher last year having a really hard time in the Giro this year, and Aitor Gonzalez in an absolute world of hurt, losing 6.5 minutes on a stage that's not even considered mountainous, even though it was very difficult. Wagelius having a great Giro up until then, and he needs a day like this to recover the rhythm back into the legs a little bit. So painful to hit the deck like that, hit your spine especially, and then have to finish a hard stage. And tomorrow he needs to get it back, and so he can do a decent ride in the mountains.
Mario Cipollini got his hand in the air. It doesn't look like there's a moment of panic. I think he's just probably signalling that he wants a raincoat, or maybe he's just ordering a martini to celebrate his 43rd victory if he gets one at the end of today, Phil. But another interesting thing when you peruse the Gazzetta dello Sporto is every day they choose a number. The other day the number was obviously 42 for Mario Cipollini's 42 stage victories. But this morning, in fact, the number was 10. And that was for the 10 Norwegian victories in the history of the Giro d'Italia. And we touched on the names yesterday. Knut Knudsen got himself 6 victories over his participations. Pedersen got himself 3. Well, yesterday Arvidsson brought that total up to 10 for Norway, which is a nice little number.
Yeah, it turned out to be a great day for Norway yesterday, because apart from Arvidsson's stage win, in Spain, in another race, Thor Hushovd got a victory for Norway, and a young lady whose name has slipped my mind at the moment, she got the race lead in France in a Tour down there, the Tour de l'Aude. So they had a marvellous day out, considering that Norway, as I was once told by people from Norway, is a very little country, and we don't have many big cyclists. Well, they all chose to win yesterday, so good luck to them. These are the leaders on the road. The gap continues to fall. We have a 6:38 coming in at the moment, but don't worry, they're hunting now, and the peloton is in search of a big bunch sprint. It's certainly going to be a great finish too. Simoni today will try to keep himself out of trouble, keep vigilant. There's Garzelli, second man here. He lost that jersey by just 2 seconds. You know, with 3 win bonuses, you never know. Now, pen and paper out. Here we go. Who is the first non-Italian to win the Giro d'Italia? There's the names to choose from. Answer the other side. And welcome back. Here's the answer to our Expedia.com trivia question. Who is the first non-Italian to win the Giro d'Italia? And as everybody knows, he came from Switzerland. His name, Hugo Koblet. The other big names, of course, in the world of cycling there for you all to see, as the Tour of Italy continues now on what is a rather wet stage today as we get down towards the closing kilometre. We're still about an hour from the finish, So there's still time for the peloton to catch up, and they are closing in. I was telling you the story, as Paul was too, about Norway's great successes yesterday, so I should complete it and tell you that Anita Varlen is the woman in France who's become the leader of the Tour de l'Aude, and I think that's the biggest prize that she will ever have won too.
Absolutely. In fact, she leads Lynn Bessette by just 9 seconds. It's a very tough bike race for the women. In fact, it's a 10-day bike race in the southern part of France, and very important. Lynn Bessette, the Canadian, by the way, has won that race twice, I think, in the past. Looking down here, the Ciclamina jersey, very briefly there, on the shoulders of Alessandro Petacchi. I think, Bob, the great thing for the riders right now, as we look at this time gap plummeting down to 4 minutes 45, although it's raining out on the course and it's fairly damp, it is dry at the finish line for the moment, because unfortunately the organisation have managed to make a tricky finish once again, although there is, as we said, a chance for the riders to see the finishing straight, because they go across the finish line, face a 5.8 kilometre circuit. There's a nasty little chicane, Phil, with about 150 metres to go.
Well, as you can see, Bob, the Giro d'Italia has lost none of its popularity.
Gigantic crowds out on the roads today. They want to see a few men. Gilberto Simoni, the people's champion, from not too far away, up in the Trentino region, and Mario Cipollini, of course, the world champion, and recently broke the record of Alfredo Binda, a record never thought to be challenged in the modern era. And Mario Cipollini getting an incredible 42 stage wins. He said he will race again next year, so who knows how many his total might be. He might get closer to 45 and 46 wins in his career in the Giro d'Italia. It's absolutely phenomenal to imagine that the second closest current rider, a rider like Marco Pantani, is way down on the list with perhaps 8 or 9 or 10 wins. And it's amazing to think that Marco Pantani, who's already had a storied career, has only 8 stages in the Giro d'Italia and needs 35 more to get near Mario Cipollini, and I don't think we're going to see that.
I don't think they are, Bob. Certainly not in our lifetime as television commentators, and probably never again. We're looking here now at the riders on Fasta Borto. This is Dario Cioni setting the pace, trying to close it down, because Alessandro Petacchi is the rider in the leader's pink jersey, or not the pink jersey, sorry, the Ciclamino jersey, which is a mauve colour, and that is for the most consistent daily finisher. He leads the race on points. There's Mario Cipollini. He lies second in that competition and closing the gap significantly now to just 30 points. And so there's 25 for the win today.
25 for the win, and I think what's important to note there, we noticed a little earlier Mario Cipollini with his hand in the air. What he was signalling for was a spare jersey. Obviously the temperature has plummeted. It was around about 21 degrees Celsius earlier on in the day, but it's now obviously dropped below that, and this wind and rain that's coming off the sea, I think, has chilled 1 or 2 of the riders. I think, Bob, what's also quite important for Gilberto Simoni today is, with just the 2-second time bonus, he was quite happy to have those 2 men off the front of the main field when they went through the Intergiro point, because Garzelli, being quite a handy sprinter, could have nipped out of the Intergiro and got himself a handful of seconds and put himself back into the lead.
Yes, that would have been a cheeky move indeed, but 2 riders up the road, and a big battle for that 3rd place. Magnus Backstedt just barely getting over DiBiase, closing in a little bit closer on the jersey, but DiBiase, it would seem now, still has the lead in the Intergiro. 4 minutes and 5 seconds now between the breakaway and the peloton. It's being led by Fassa Bortolo and Domina Vacanze, but the Saeco team right there on the front of the bike race, all of their riders totally dedicated to the chances of Simoni. You can see him, number 151, Simoni, Sacchi, Spezia, Leti, Zabalaikas, Bertagnelli, who helped him so well in the breakaway yesterday, Fornacciari, Pieri, Tonti, Cunego, the youngest rider in the Giro d'Italia this year. It's a fantastic squad. Garzelli isolated by himself in the finale of yesterday's bike race. I don't think we would have seen that on a stage like yesterday. I am sure if Simoni was in the lead and Garzelli attacked him, you would have seen the red card come forward and defend that lead all the way to the finish. So team-wise, I'd have to say that Saeco, for the moment, much stronger than the Vini Caldirola team.
But in fact, looking at the team competition here, Phil, Saeco lost a little bit of time in their advantage there. They're still the strongest team. They lead Lampre now by just 15 seconds, and that's a competition that could change when we go to the top of the big mountain finish tomorrow, the Zoncolan, because I think those seconds that we're seeing in that competition could very well change into minutes.
Well, that's the way it should be. We'll show you the profile later of that finishing climb. It's an absolute brute. and will be the second mountaintop finish of 5 in this year's Giro. There's no easy part to the Giro d'Italia now as we head up towards Milan. The last week is very cruel indeed, and there's an awful lot of racing to come. And you can see now we've got the peloton in the same town now, just up behind the breakaway. So they're closing in rather rapidly, and not surprisingly, Mario Cipollini's team, Domino Vacanzi, and also the Fassa Bortolo team of Alessandro Patacchi have been told now to chase these two riders down and do it as fast as possible so they can set themselves up for a very, very good finish when we get down to San Donna. These two riders out in front since the 35th kilometre. As we approach 50 kilometres to go, I think they're going to be picked up. But they're still away at the moment. The last time gap, 4 minutes and 5 seconds. They'll still be in the lead when we come back after these messages. And welcome back to the Giro d'Italia. There is the latest time check. Another minute has been knocked off now. 3 minutes 24 seconds to Mirko Marini and Sergei Lelekin, both on the same team. And a problem here, this is a flat tyre, and it'll have to be a quick change because this, I think, is, I think I might be wrong, it's Muraglia, is it? No, it's Laverde. Well, he's a good climber, 31st overall, and lying just 10 minutes 55 off.
Was a bit of chaos there, Phil. I think somebody might have been involved in a slight accident as well. In fact, there is an accident there.
Now, this is
a rather
good.
sad accident too, because it looks as if that is rather a hard crash. The chaos there, you can see at the back end. One of the riders who went down was definitely Laverde, but I can't see who has gone into a rather strange little entrance there. In fact, it's one of the Vinny Calderola Sinomec riders.
It is. Now, we'll keep watching these pictures for a moment. I think, and I might be wrong, it's Oscar Masson.
Well, it looks like it might be a number 1 there, Phil, and I'm wondering if it might be Garzelli himself, because it's hard to get in from that.
He's hurt his back. He's obviously fallen into a drain. No, it's not Garzelli, but he's lying, as you can see, in what is a nasty drain, and he's obviously flipped off the side of the road there, Bob, and gone down into that ditch.
These canal roads along here, they have the cement driveways leading to the houses to clear those culverts, and I myself have crashed into those, and I can remember missing the, you can see the pipe there by inches. This rider seems to be all right. He's really hurt though. He's very shaken up. He's got to try to pull himself out of that ditch. It might be Andriotto. Oh, it's Oscar Masson. It is 187 from the Vinny Calderola team. It's a very difficult moment to watch. The doctor is right there on the spot. The crash helmet, in this instance, may be doing its job there.
But he's hurt his leg, Bob.
If he hit his head, though, usually it's a head injury when a rider won't move like that. But he seems to be in a tremendous amount of difficulty, and the spectators now crowding around. It's a tough sport. Anything can happen. You're out on the roads, in and amongst the people. That's one of the beauties of the sport of cycling, but it also is one of the most dangerous parts of it because you're subject to any type of thing the road can throw at you. There is his helmet there on the parapet of that driveway. And Oscar Mason, now he's starting to get up now. Seems like he's going to be all right, but in a tremendous amount of pain.
He's okay. It's a question of whether he can get himself organised to ride back to the finishing line. You have to finish every stage to start again next day. This happened to Charlie Wegelius, the British rider, yesterday. He hit a fencing and he hurt his back. He thought he was okay till he started to ride. He was in dreadful pain. He finished 17 minutes after the winner yesterday and plummeted down the overall classification. Now, Oscar Masson here has been involved in a crash when he was attacking the other day, about 48 hours ago. Now, it looks as though they're actually suspecting, I think, although he's standing up now, so they can't, because I was saying they're getting the stretcher ready there, but I think this man might well continue here. They're going to bring him up to the road, but he's taken a very nasty blow in the chest, and I'm not surprised falling off the road into a storm drain, and they might be wondering about broken ribs here.
Could be broken ribs. He doesn't seem to be too worried about his collarbone, which is the normal first thing you look for in an accident like this when you've been catapulted over the handlebars. I think he may well have gone down and possibly cracked a couple of ribs, which is a very painful thing to happen, but I don't think Oscar Masson will be getting back onto his machine here right now, and we do have to accentuate the point, Phil, that you have to finish every individual stage of a bike race like the Giro d'Italia or the Tour de France in order to stay in the event. But I think this young man is going to be evacuated to home. They are checking right now to see if there is a problem with the collarbone. and the team manager is up alongside him there right now. And it's, as Bob said, it's a very tough sport, and there's no safety measures possible on a stage of 222 kilometres. You really are out on the open roads.
Well, the doctors will allow the rider to continue, providing he doesn't have a suspected head injury, which he doesn't in this case. It'll be the rider's decision to go on, and the medical people there will just ask him a few questions. If they get the right answers, it's up to him whether he can continue or not. Obviously, if he's got something broken, he can't, and it could well be that they're still debating this. But he looks a little bit groggy, to say the least. It's such a shock. It doesn't seem very far to fall off your bike into a hole about 2 feet deep. But when you're standing also 6 feet tall, it is a nasty shock.
Well, even if he does manage to get back onto his machine here, he's still got to get himself to the finish line inside the elimination, and that would be a very difficult thing to do right now. But they are putting him onto the stretcher. This man has been a professional since 1998. He actually started to have a very good season this year, Phil, with a win in the Giro di Abruzzo, and he also got himself a 6th place finish in the Flèche Wallonne. But he'll be taking the ambulance to the finish of this year's Giro d'Italia. I think that's probably the safest and most sensible decision to make right now.
That's right. There are plenty more bike races for him in the future. He's a young rider with great hope, also involved in the crash, and I think they might be able to see it here. Just keep your eye down in the middle of the peloton there. There's a little bit of switching going on behind Mario Cipollini's wheel, but we're not saying that was the cause of the crash. Now, we're not sure why they showed us those pictures, but also involved were Laverde, Elaio Aggiani and Bastia. So there were 4 riders involved in that crash. Well, we're back up with the 2 leaders now. We haven't forgotten about them. The last time check was 3 minutes 24. It's less than that now. And they will be totally unaware of what is disrupting the chase behind. But here we have Mirko Marini, Sergei Lelekin out in front. Meanwhile, at the back of the race, the Gerolsteiner rider here is Robert Foster, having a very good race. He's going back to the team cars. It looks like they're taking a little bit of time out now to get drinks from the cars before they have to put their nose on the front wheel and chase down those 2 leaders, because we're getting closer to the finish and the skies are still looking quite angry up there. And let's hope they don't get too much of a rainstorm when we do get into the finishing town, because once we're into Sandona, we do have a finishing circuit, and it's not a simple one, so they won't want too much of a wet surface on the road. Well, we'll keep you on top of the Oscar Masson situation, but it looks as though poor old Oscar is now out of the Tour, and the race is down to 160 riders. These are the 2 leaders. They're still clear, and the gap 2 minutes 38. We'll take another short break. Well, we're looking out at Venice now, and I tell you what, Paul, those black clouds coming in mean the umbrellas and raincoats need to come out, because we are riding into the eye of a storm here, and we still have 2 riders up front, Marini and Lelekin, and the latest time, look at that sky, 2 minutes 38 seconds. I think we'll go indoors, Bob.
Yes, if it was an indoor sport, the riders, maybe not today, but tomorrow most certainly, if those clouds stay over the Dolomite Mountains, we'll wish it was an indoor sport like velodrome racing on the track. But bike racing is out amongst it, and that's why it's so beautiful.
And it never gets stopped unless weather conditions get extreme, and once the race has started, well, it virtually never gets stopped.
I tell you one thing, the weather can get very extreme before they actually stop the bike race. I remember a couple of years ago riding Paris-Nice, Phil, and there was 4 or 5 inches of snow on the road, and it seemed to snow on every occasion. We were always waiting for them to cancel the event, but it took place anyway. And I think Bob remembers when Andy Hampson won his Giro d'Italia, the weather was not all that clement, was it?
No, it was a brutal stage weather-wise. It started snowing about 2 kilometers into the race, and by the time we got to the top of the Gavia Pass, high up in the mountains, there was about 4 feet of snow on the ground. In this day and age, they would never let a bike race go over that. They would definitely bring it to a close at the top of the climb at the very least, but they asked us to descend in that stage down into Bormio, and the rest, as they say, is history. One of the most dramatic days in the history of cycling, weather-wise, and racing wasn't too bad either, with Eric Breukink winning the stage and Andy Hampson taking the pink jersey and never relinquishing it, and remains the only American to win the Giro d'Italia.
Well, we're looking at the very, very angry sky indeed. We're in the province now of Venezia, which is Venice in English. The gap is down to just on 2 minutes, so the field doing what they have to do now to bring this race in. We can confirm that the unlucky rider, Oscar Masson, has actually retired from the race. He's now off to hospital to have some x-rays to see if he has broken any ribs. And the rest of the riders who fell, Laverdi, Aggiano and Bastia, they remounted and are currently about to rejoin the peloton, so they're chased back into the race. There's the field down there. The boys in red are the teammates of the new race leader. Here he comes with the pink sleeves. You can't see his pink leader's jersey today because he's got a top on to keep warm, and that is Gilberto Simoni. Now they'll all be looking out at the skies there and just thinking, boy, are we going to get wet in a moment? And they'll hope that it's just a bit of a flash storm and moves away pretty quickly before we get down to the finishing circuit around Sandona.
Well, I think the worrying thing for the riders, as you can see here, this is not too far away from the finishing straight. This is the little chicane that the organisation have managed to find themselves at 150 metres to go at Sandona de Piave. These are live pictures of the finishing line, and the rain, unfortunately, has started to come down there. Look at those clouds, and I think what is even worse, Phil, is tomorrow we will be going into the high mountains, and if weather conditions are like this, well, it's going to make the stage, which is already a very difficult stage, even tougher.
Well, Bob, it's going to cool the old body down when that lock comes down.
Well, the riders looking up the high, we can see that, have started to put caps on under their helmets, and even though there's sun on the race right now, they all have rain capes on, expecting the inevitable rain to start to fall on the race pretty soon, and it'll make the finishing area a little bit treacherous. Most certainly Mario Cipollini uncorking one of his best sprints of his career, because there was a turn so close to the finish line to break the record of Alfredo Binda. He might have to produce something extra special today to go up that total up into the 43s there. And Gilberto Simoni, Stefano Garzelli will want to stay right at the front of the peloton. There were some crashes in the sprints. I mean, every day there's been gaps opened up in the peloton, and so it'd be an absolutely chaotic finish, especially if those black clouds start to open up and pour down on the Giro d'Italia.
The hand going up there from a teammate of Cipollini, and that is Mondini, and I think he's probably going to ask for a cape, a wise man. Now, Bob, I've heard of riders being struck by lightning, or at least their bikes. The handlebars usually catch the lightning bolts, but I've never heard of a serious problem from it.
Thank God they have the helmet rule, because if you did get hit by a bolt of lightning, you might want to have a little bit of polystyrene on top of your cranium to absorb some of the electricity. So another good reason to have that helmet rule, even though I disagree with it at the top level of the sport.
Now don't start that. We'll fill the email bag up again.
Well, let's get back to the race here, Phil, because it's rather close now to these two riders being caught. The last time check we got was 2 minutes. I think it's close to the 1 minute margin. We could see from that long shot from the helicopter there, these are the two leaders. They're, Bob, looking at their pedaling action right now, they've lost an awful lot of energy. It's a big call to go out and try and succeed on a long breakaway like this. These guys escaped after 35 kilometers of racing. They've led the race now for about 130 kilometers, and that's a tall order on a day like this.
Especially when you got a headwind all the way up the coast like these riders have experienced, and Peloton starting to race very fast behind them, swept up the advantage really quickly. I thought that they might stay away since they had such a big advantage, a little bit closer to the finish. We still have a long ways to go, and they're about to be caught, and I think there must be a pretty big headwind out on the course today.
Well, looking at the pictures here, it's a long time since I've seen such a dark day. It's mid-afternoon here in Italy, and the riders racing right into the eye of this storm. And who knows what will happen if that storm realizes what apparently is going to be one big downpour in the next few minutes. Still, Mario Cipollini sat there dreaming of win number 43. There's two riders just in front. He's not worried about those two riders. He knows now they're going to catch them up, but I say they're going to be worried about the weather that's coming their way. We'll take a short break. Join us for the wet days. And welcome back to the Giro d'Italia. The riders now hunting down the two race-long breakaways of Mirko Marini and Sergei Lelekin. Approximately 40 kilometers, maybe slightly less for the two leaders towards the finish, and we pass through the finishing line, 5.8 kilometers to go. There are the two leaders, and I fear for them now as we pull back, because here comes the cavalry. Now we are racing towards the finishing town of Sandona. It is already raining on the finishing line quite heavily, and at minute 32 they're saying, well, I think that's already gone out the window. It's less than that now. And in fact, Paul, that black sky, that rain down at the finishing line is going to be here very shortly.
It is, and it's going to make the circuit around the town of the finishing line of San Dona di Piave very difficult and treacherous. You can see, in fact, it looks like the Ciclamina jersey there has got himself a raincoat on. Just on the right-hand side there, that's Alessandro Patacchi with the mauve-coloured shorts. Cipollini himself getting covered up against the elements also. It's going to be an interesting sprint towards the end. Cipollini, I think, for the moment has been very sensible, Bob, because there's really only been one or two of his men on the front setting the pacemaking. He's keeping the rest of the train back a bit, saving them for the final charge around that 5.8 kilometre circuit. The team that has done a lot of work is the team of Alessandro Patacchi, the Fassa Bortolo.
Well, that shows you that Patacchi fired up about this sprint today. Oftentimes it happens that the team that does all of the work to bring the breakaways back, you see their rider capable of producing something extra special. We see that a lot. And look at the finish line now. Pouring rain at the finish. Now, if there's a headwind that the riders are experiencing and they do this 6-kilometer circuit before the finish line, we might even get some crosswind, so it'll be a really furious, frantic finish. All the GC guys and sprinters trying to stay in the front of the bike race so they don't lose any time. Sprinters to have a chance to win the stage. GC riders to have a chance for their overall. It can not be won on the GC today, but a lot can be lost, so it could be a very frantic finish.
They must take no risks today. As the crow flies, it's 30 kilometres to that finishing line, and yet it's not raining here. So they will hope that the rain will all be used up before they get to the finishing town of San Dona. These two boys are now coming up to just on a minute clear of the field. And a little bit of a red flag warning there because of that traffic island, but they've come through it safely. And we're just about getting the odd spot on the camera lens now. It's amazing how the weather can change in just a few kilometres, but I wonder if they're going to be lucky, Paul, and that big black sky will be going light again as they approach it.
You never know, it can change so dramatically in this part of the world. At the back end of the main field, there's still quite a lot of excitement going on. It looked like Tiralongo at the back, the man who was in the breakaway yesterday, trying to get himself the victory into his team sponsor's hometown, but the rain's certainly coming down right now over the peloton, which is why there's the chaos at the back end. Everybody going back looking for raincoats and hats, and usually that's the domestique's job, isn't it, Bob, right now, to go back and look after their team leaders.
Well, that was a Lamprey rider coming back through the peloton to get a rain jacket for Casagrande and Rumsas, and maybe even Vladimiro Belli, so he might have a pocket full of rain jackets to come back up. It's difficult to go back through the peloton to the team car, get a bunch of rain jackets, then pass the whole group as they're speeding along in the front and start handing out rain jackets at the front. It's a real skill when you can do that well, and on a day like today, you can see the Saeco riders doing the same for Gilberto Simoni. On a day like today, it's absolutely critical for the team's success.
Pretty strange there, because one of the Lamprey riders going back through the cars there was in fact Jans Vorada, Phil, and he's a man who I would expect to feel that he's got a chance of victory today, because he's a man who's always come up with a win somewhere throughout his career. One of those strange bike riders who over the last couple of years, a bit like Dmitry Konishev, the Russian rider, have kept threatening with us with retirement, but here he is still at the front end of international cycling.
Well, the other element of the sprint is going to come into play if this continues, because we are now getting into the wet roads. This is the peloton now. It's no longer pleasant. And, you know, great risks necessary if you want to win the stage today. And do the riders want to take such risks? Well, there are always those in the peloton, Bob, who will.
Yes, absolutely. We've lost one, Naudux, who was eliminated from the race from perhaps taking a few too many risks, taking his hands off the bar to punch Alessandro Patacchi right on top of the helmet. Patacchi had just done the same thing to him, so it's my opinion that it was an unfair disqualification of Naudux and allowing Patacchi to stay in the race. They either should have both been let to stay in and given penalties, or both kicked out, because they basically did the same infraction. So a little bit saying, even though Naudux was perhaps the antagonist in that situation.
32 kilometres to go, and that's for the two leaders, who are just about a minute ahead still. They've actually improved by a few seconds because the field has become distracted, dropping back for racing capes and handing them back up to their team leaders. And of course, somebody like Gilberto Simoni here, the new leader of the Tour, he's the man with the best time for the route so far. They are taking no risks here. They're just going to gradually move along. There's little Freddy Gonzalez. You can't see his green jersey today, but he is the leader of the King of the Mountains, and he'll get a new one tonight because there's no mountains on this very flat stage today. He too going back to the team cars for his racing cape. 30 kilometers to go for the two leaders, Mirko Marini, Sergei Lelekin, and it is Marini who's at the back moment. Well, it is unpleasant when you're racing weather like this, but I have to say, Bob, when I was a cyclist, as a racing cyclist, I used to enjoy racing in the rain.
Yes, oddly enough, some athletes take to the rain a lot better than others. I remember Rolf Goltz, a German rider, world champion on the track, who is a great professional, won a lot of big bike races. He won a stage in the Tour de France that it rained buckets from start to finish, and he seemed to be the freshest of the bunch. He took off. Everyone else's legs were leaden with water, and they couldn't ride. Looks like a little bit of an attack coming from the Kelme rider, and Rolf Goltz was a real specialist in the rain.
This is Riera, Jordi Riera, the Spanish rider on Kelme. He's decided to open up the counter-attacks, and he might well be the first. There's that same 30-kilometer banner. Just moments ago we saw the two leaders go under. He's trying to reach them, give them a little bit of extra impetus, and maybe ride them away from the front. I don't think he's got much chance of that happening.
Well, not for the moment. I think the sprinters will take over. We've just gone through the 1 minute mark for the main field, and they've brought that down from what was at one stage a maximum advantage for the two leaders of 13 minutes and 40 seconds. But just to expand a little bit on riders who perform exceptionally well in wet weather conditions, let's not forget about Lance Armstrong. Strangely enough, Lance spends most of his time in Austin, Texas, where the weather is superb for riding a bike. But he's done, Phil, some of his best performances in the Tour de France and, of course, in the World Championships when the weather conditions have been absolutely abysmal.
Yes, absolutely right. You've got to be prepared to ride in all weathers, because you can't take time out when you don't like the conditions. Tough bike riders will survive everything that's thrown at them. And if you're with us when we saw the crash of Oscar Masson, who's now been taken off to hospital, we hope not too seriously injured. It didn't appear to be so, but he's out of the race. The riders who fell with him, Leverdi, Adjano and Bastia, have now safely come back into the main field. So they've chased back in. They've profited by the riders slowing down to take on racing capes, ready for the tough rain ahead. There's the latest gaps. 1 minute 3 seconds is the spread now, and it's going to really all come back together again before the finish. I'm sure about that. Lars Bak is the rider out front. Now, while his teammate Arvidsson was winning yesterday, Lars Bak was finishing last of the 161 riders, and so the Fatka team, top and tail the race yesterday.
Well, they're having a brilliant season, really. I think this is quite remarkable for a smaller team who came into the Giro d'Italia, maybe with not so many great hopes, to come out with an awful lot of success. The other man getting into that breakaway there from the Formaggio Pinzoli team was Giuseppe Muraglia, a man who in his youth was the winner of the Baby Giro, the Giro for the under-23 riders.
Well, our cameraman out there getting as wet as the riders. It's the job I never did want, was riding on the back of those motorcycles. They take as many risks as the riders to bring us absolutely stunning pictures at times in these conditions, as we now watch the race in full flight. There'll be no slowing down now despite the weather. They'll be guided through on lights by the cars at times, I reckon, but they're heading down towards the finish in Sandona. When they get there, it's a 5.8 kilometre finishing circuit. Watch out for the fun and games. We'll be back. And welcome back to the Giro d'Italia, and about 10 seconds ago the whole peloton came up alongside the two breakaway riders, Mirko Marini and Sergei Lelekin. They have been wiped out, and I reckon they're about 27 kilometres from the finishing line now, and the whole field are back together at a nice tempo. The clouds are getting a little bit lighter up there. The downpour hopefully was ahead of them. There's a little look back to about 30 seconds ago as the peloton came up on the two leaders from the same Tenax team and wiped them out. So now it is literally everybody in the hat for the big sprint finish, which is about 27 kilometres to go.
A tough day in the saddle for those guys, Phil, because they led the bike race for 160 kilometres. This is the chaos at the back end of the main field, and this is certainly on a stage like this where you do not want to be. There's the banner indicating 25 kilometres to go to the finish line right now, and I think the sensible manoeuvre of the Saeco team is to go to the front, keep the tempo up there, and keep Gilberto Simoni out of danger. Simoni there riding very comfortably in fourth position. You can just see the pink sleeves jutting out of his raincoat. Mario Cipollini not too far behind either. Julian Wynne, the British national champion, in the red, white and blue jersey there. Cipollini just going through. Not too far away from Cipollini, Jans Vorada. The Ciclamina jersey there, Bob, as well, of Alessandro Patecchi, riding very close to the back wheel of Cipollini, which I think he feels he's got a serious option on.
He seems to have been able to grab it time and time again during the sprints that he won. It'll be hard to see him if he doesn't take off that rain cape. We might see those doffed with a few kilometers to go because they do catch a lot of wind, so you want to have every possible aerodynamic advantage when you're trying to come around Mario Cipollini as he tanks down the line at about 70 kilometers an hour. It's virtually impossible to do. Cipollini starting the Giro perhaps a little bit undertrained. He didn't race very much. He only had won 2 stages, a couple of smaller sprints in the Tirreno Adriatico stage race. That's a smaller stage race in the spring in Italy. But he's been able to ride himself into form. He's gotten a little bit stronger every day, and that is the mark of a true champion, that the stress of the bike race, actually he gets fitter and stronger the more kilometers he pedals at such a difficult tempo. So Cipollini now in fine form, starting to fire on all cylinders and winning the sprints. Now the other sprinters will have a very hard time coming around him. Robbie McEwen is threatened early in the Giro d'Italia to not drop out, to drop out on the 13th stage, not pedal any further than that, and he might have a hard time making it through the mountains tomorrow, but after that he does have a few more chances to win. And Alessandro Petacchi probably finished the race. He's fighting for the purple jersey as the points leader also in this Giro d'Italia now. I'm sure he'd love to wear that into Milan. It looks like it's going to be a battle between himself and Mario Cipollini for that purple jersey. He did lose 25 points for fighting with Naudux from the CCC Polstat team, and so that might be a blow, and that might make the difference in Milan. But today I think we're going to be treated to a big sprint finish. It looks like Fabio Sacchi on the front of the bike race now, one of the strong riders on the Seiko team, and they faltered hard on yesterday's team, the team of the race leader Garzelli, and I don't think we would see that from any of the riders on the Seiko team. They'll be all over the front of this bike race because it will be a dangerous, tricky circuit into the finish, and they'll want to keep Simoni out of danger.
Well, Phil, just to come back to that points classification, the difference in points between Alessandro Petacchi and Mario Cipollini has been reduced now to just 30 points, I should say, because of those 25 points taken away from Petacchi with his incident involving Nauduz. You can see the pink jersey there very comfortably sitting at the front end of the main field. Ciclamina jersey, well, the sleeves just popping through there on Alessandro Petacchi. He too is riding at the front end of the main peloton. At the back end, still a certain amount of chaos as riders are putting on and taking off raincoats as we get closer to the finish. And I have to agree with Bob that as we do get closer to the finish, the big sprinters will certainly get off those raincoats because they do take an awful lot of drag on board.
Well, conditions getting a little bit brighter at least as we look here at Kim Kirchen. He's a Luxembourger. They don't produce many cyclists, but they did produce one that once won the Giro, Charlie Gaulle, who also won the Tour de France. He was my hero, Bob, the angel of the mountains, they always called him. What a great bike rider. You know, I got to go into Luxembourg, my very first country I visited as a cyclist when I was 18 years of age I was, and I went into this little bed and breakfast place, and I said to the lady, I said, Charlie Gaulle's my hero. She said, oh no, Charlie Gaulle, he's too fat now, he's finished. And that was, I hate to say it, that was in the late 60s.
Well, he did put on a lot of weight after he stopped his career, and we used to postulate that the more weight you put on after your career, the greater a pro you were. And Charlie Gaulle was a truly great pro because he put on huge amounts of weight. He was a tiny little climber, and the next time he went into seclusion in the forests of Luxembourg. He didn't come out for a long time. When he re-emerged, it seemed as if he had never touched his bicycle again, and he had grown in proportion. But his legend continued to grow while he was in seclusion, and now I think he does enjoy coming out to the odd bike race, showing up, starting the race, and he's a wonderful man. I've met him a number of times when I was an amateur in Switzerland and as a professional, and I always found him to be a very happy-go-lucky guy, and he was a great cycling champion.
Well, he did come out, Phil, at the presentation of the Tour de France last year, which was really the presentation of the 100th anniversary of the Tour this year, and I'm sure with many of the other champions he will be on the final stage on the Champs-Élysées, because they're trying to bring together all of the winners of the Tour de France who are still alive to come and ride a lap of honour on the final day of the Champs-Élysées. So that will be a great day to be there, and certainly you get a chance to see some of the most magnificent champions of all time.
Yeah, you bet. It'll be a great occasion. So the angel of the mountains, Charlie Gaulle, and now we're looking at young Kim Kirchen down there having to make his way as a Luxembourger. If you make the name, become a top cyclist in Luxembourg, of course, you've really done good, because they don't have many cyclists coming out of Luxembourg at the highest level. Now we're looking down at the field, as it looks to me as though the weather is slightly improving here. Somebody from Lampreys had themselves a bit of bother. They've gone back for racing tops. so we can't read the numbers anymore, but I would suspect, judging by the number of riders back there, then probably Francesco Casagrande has gone down there.
Could well be Casagrande. The fact is that there are so many riders who've gone back. There must have been some kind of incident rather than just a raincoat thing, Phil.
Yeah, looks a bit more serious. Anyway, they're going to get back as we head down now towards the finish. We'll just take another break. Stay with us as we head to San Donna. Welcome back to the Giro d'Italia. We're now 19 kilometres from the finishing line, but about 14 kilometres from getting a good view of it as the riders go out on a small finishing circuit. The rain appears to have eased considerably, but the roads are extremely wet.
The roads are very wet indeed, and in fact, strangely enough, just before the riders charge into town, there's just been a press conference, Phil, by the Domino Vacanze team management, or the man who owns the company, and he's actually put a proposition to Hein Verbruggen, the boss of the Union Cycliste Internationale, about the possibility of having 23 teams in the Tour. And Mr. Verbruggen says, well, the international cycling government do have no problem at all with that. But in fact, the response has come back from Jean-Marie Leblanc that it is a bit of a problem logistically to bring 23 teams in, and asked what he meant by that. He said, well, you know, team cars and hotels and this, that and the other. And the boss of Domino Vacanze said, well, there shouldn't be any problem at all. He said, because we're a holiday company, we can get you some hotels.
They're probably block booked all the way around anyway, in case Cipollini did get a ride in the Tour. Who knows? We're just having a little return here. This is what happened a while ago now, about 10 kilometres ago, the surrender of Marini and Lelekin as the main field brought them back. They were in the lead for 160 kilometres, which is exactly 100 miles today, and at one stage had a lead of almost 14 minutes. But we're all back together now. Even the riders who fell off earlier have rejoined the field, except the one dropout today, Oscar Masson, who unfortunately appears to be slightly injured, and we hope it's nothing more serious than a couple of broken ribs, because the only cure for broken ribs is time.
Certainly is. It's one of the most painful injuries that a professional athlete can get, because there is, as you say, Phil, there's no way of strapping it up, there's no way of getting through the pain. You just have to wait for it to heal, and it can take 6 weeks, sometimes 2 months. I remember one of the silly accidents I had a few years ago was, in fact, in the old days, before these new shorts which come with the braces already fitted in, we used to ride, what do you call them in...
Suspenders?
Suspenders. We used to wear suspenders with a big metal buckle on them, and actually crashed, and that went straight into the rib, and it took about 2 months for that pain to go away.
Yes, well, even I've broken my ribs, but that was when they rolled the car following Paris-Roubaix, so I've got no real heroic excuse there. We're watching now Rafael Iliano, a man who was on the attack yesterday. He's having another go. He's in the race-long break yesterday. They got wiped out by the tornado known as Gilberto Simoni towards the end on that last climb. And these are the riders at the back. They're now deciding that weather's changing for the better, and they're getting ready, of course, to fall in line for their man in the sprint, Mario Cipollini. This rider, in fact, is he putting those on or taking them off? I think he's putting them on, so he's still suspecting rain by the finishing line. This is Benati.
Very important, integral part of Mario Cipollini's line-out. He's the man who does the unbelievable turns, and every time he comes to the front, I can see Bob gasping for breath, because he knows that that man is going to do a turn on the front of around about 700 metres, which at a speed approaching 40 miles an hour, Bob, is quite a remarkable performance.
Benati, a great sprinter himself, and one of the young hopes in Italian cycling. He won some brilliant stages of bike races earlier in the year as a very new professional. He was brought onto the Giro team because Cipollini identified him correctly as a very faithful lieutenant in the lead-outs, and he's been doing the long, really fast wind-up from about 1 kilometer to go to where Lombardi takes over for the last 300 or 400 meters. From about 150 to 200 meters out is where Cipollini hits the front. That's a three-punch combination that's been very, very effective in the Giro so far, and they've won the last 2 stages on the gallop for sprinters, and the Norwegian getting yesterday's very hilly stage, but it's been Domino Vacanze overcoming the early superiority of this team right here, the Fossa Bortolo team, and I can assure you that that man right there, Alessandro Patacchi, would like to get a little bit of Cipollini's thunder back.
Yes, he would. That was in the biggest traffic circle I think I've ever seen. Good job the riders didn't go the wrong way around that. It would have been a tough recovery today. Well, the riders still putting on racing capes, so they might know something we don't at the moment. We have had confirmation. We saw Casagrande at the back of the race that in fact he had a flat tyre, but his teammates have brought him back into the field.
in the man who spent about 160 kilometres of today's stage off the front, and he now is a prisoner in the main field. On the front end of the peloton for the moment, it's the control of Alessandro Petacchi's team as they go under the banner indicating 15 kilometres to go. That's approximately 9 miles. Still no sign of Mario Cipollini's zebra-clad herd coming up and whipping up the pacemaking. I don't think, Bob, we shall see them until we come into the circuit, the finishing circuit, when all of the big sprinters will try and keep themselves at the front end of the peloton, because even though the finishing circuit today is reasonably safe, it will be made just that little bit more dangerous by the fact that it's a very wet surface.
Very rainy day today as the riders come into the finishing town. We haven't seen the Domina Vacanze zebra train of Mario Cipollini come to the front until the absolutely perfect moment. It seems like he just knows exactly when to send his riders forward. They've been conserving energy all day today. They've been staying towards the front, not at the front. And Saeco's been doing a lot of that work to protect Simoni, and Fassa Bortolo's been doing a lot of that work to set up Petacchi, make sure all the breakaways come back. And Mario Cipollini using his riders to the maximum effect, putting them on the front just at the right moment. We've seen them get to the front with less than 5 kilometers to go at times in this Giro d'Italia, and that shows a lot of confidence that Cipollini has. He knows exactly when they need to be up there.
Well, they're going to need to be there for the final corner today, because it's a very tricky, it's not a real corner, Phil, it's more like a chicane, but just put in at 150 metres to go. I really wonder sometimes at the organisational powers at the Giro d'Italia to put something like that in so close to the finish, and why they didn't finish the race just before the corner, because it does make these sprints a lot more dangerous than the ones we usually have at the Tour de France.
Well, I'm sure they've got their reasons, and as a past organiser of a big international bike race for 22 years, I do know these problems are on both sides. You think of the riders' safety, but also you have to think too of what the townsfolk are paying and the approaches, and all sorts of problems these days in organising races like this. But long may it continue as we see the Tour of Italy now heading into the last 13 kilometres of today's stage. They're a bit behind schedule, to say the least. They haven't been in a big hurry today, and that's because tomorrow is a real rough finish of a big mountain.
Nice look here at Mario Cipollini. Just a moment ago we saw one of his teammates toying with the possibility of going back to the team car to hand off his raincoat, and then decided that rather than expend the energy of going to the back end of the main field and trying to get back up to the front end of the peloton with about 8 miles to go, he discarded that $50 overcoat, Bob, and I think that's probably not a great problem for a big professional team like Domina Vacanze.
Well, they'll have plenty of rain jackets, and they might need them as the Giro continues to progress up into the mountains. He just chucked his rain jacket into the lawn there, and when the person that lives there comes to get the newspaper tomorrow morning, he'll have a nice little prize of one of the Domina Vacanze rain jackets there. It's quite lovely. Unless one of the people following the race have spotted that on the TV, they'll run down there and grab that rain jacket. Quite a nice prize.
You bet your life they'll be out in it tomorrow on the bikes or down the bakery. As we're looking at the field now, still rain on the camera lens. It is still raining, but not as torrential as it's promised to come down, because it hit the finishing line. Had we arrived at the finishing line, say 30 minutes ago, we would have been in terrible state. I think riders would have been sliding off the bicycles in every direction. We need the roads to just ease out a little bit as we get down towards the finish. As I say, 12 to 13 kilometres left to ride, but we passed through the finish with 5.8 kilometres to go. That's about 3.5 miles from the line. There's yesterday's stage winner, Kurt Arvesen, the champion of Norway. Give us a smile, Kurt. I don't blame him. He's looking rather damp today, but he had a wonderful win he'll remember for the rest of his life, because he won wearing the champion's jersey of his country. That's a great feeling.
It certainly is, and you just got a quick glimpse there. He had the rainbow stripes on his shoulder as well. He was world champion at the under-23 level of the sport in San Sebastian, beating another man who went on to become 2 times world professional road race champion from Spain, Oscar Ferreira. Still, Bob, a little bit of disorganisation at the front end of the main field. We're 11 kilometres from the finish right now. In a kilometre or so we will enter onto the circuit, and the riders will follow the last 4 kilometres up until the finishing line, and that'll give them a chance to see just exactly what the run-in is going to be like.
Well, Vini Calderola on the front there, and we saw Gilberto Simoni right at the front of the bike race. Both Garzelli and Simoni very attentive. They're so strong they can make those efforts and continue to recover day after day, stay in the front and not lose the time.
Stefano Garzelli, this is his team. There's Stefano. Remember, he's lost a teammate today that he might need later on. Oscar Masson crashing out of the race, so his team reduced now by one man. That could be crucial in the final week of this race. No such bad luck today for the Seiko team. They're still nursing their man, Gilberto Simoni, towards the finish of this stage. As we approach the 10 kilometre to go banner, we'll take... And welcome back, and we are now approaching the streets here of Sandone di Piave. 9 kilometres to go, slightly less than that. And the field now, Paul, in charge of Garzelli's team.
Well, Garzelli's a man who may well look to try and place himself up there. He's a very agile bike rider. We've seen him take out a stage victory so far, and he also, Bob, is the kind of man who would look for the opportunity to take back the lead. Let's not forget, as we are welcomed into the town of Sandone here by the local populace, that if he could get across the line in the first 3 places, he will become the new leader of the bike race. Maybe only temporarily, because tomorrow we certainly go into the domain of the leader of Seiko, Gilberto Simoni. It's the zebra train on the front here right now, and they're getting themselves organised. We're on the last few kilometres, Phil, of the finishing circuit, which the riders will get a chance to see, and in a few kilometres time they will cross the finishing line and see that they face 5.8 kilometres to the final line of the day. But this young man at the back here looks like Gabriele Colombo, who's had a pretty hard time over the last couple of days, but Cipollini still has enough men around him at the front end of the pack.
Yes, lost a little bit of ground there, and he's trying to hang on to the tail of the peloton. As we look down at the world champion here, remember, searching for the 43rd stage win in his career, and the 3rd time he will have won in this race. A remarkable achievement at 36 years of age. He's got his team on the front. There's a lot of spray out there, as you can see from the bikes as well, and it's still raining here. Umbrellas are up. Now, it is an interesting move, this, because Garzelli might well be looking to get that pink jersey back. It'll give him a lot of confidence tomorrow. He'll climb well tomorrow, he said so, as we go up into the mountains again. And if this weather conditions persist, who knows what we're going to meet on top of the Zoncolan tomorrow.
Well, the fight for Cipollini's wheel has already begun between Furlan, McEwen and Bataki. It looks like Iso or Casper's there for the Champs-Élysées team is also fighting for Cipollini's wheel. The Fossil Borcolo riders trying to come around, go out into the wind for their man Pataki a little bit, take the relief off of the fight for Cipollini's wheel, but Pataki seems to be absolutely glued to it, while the Vini Caldirola guys are on the front of the peloton. If they do open up some gaps and Simoni is caught behind, you only need a couple of seconds. We could see Garzelli right back up in the front of the bike race. Of course, the same could happen to he himself.
Well, Robbie McEwen's men are moving forward on the left-hand side in the black, red and white jerseys of Lotto Domo. As we go back to the tail end of the group, you can see that men just hoping to stay in contact. This is going to be rather tricky today around this circuit. Let's not forget 5.8 kilometres. That's around about a 4-mile finishing circuit. Should say there has been a crash at the back. It's a Planaria rider. I wonder if it's Graham Brown who's had problems there.
No, in fact, it is Graham Brown, that isn't it? Yeah, it's Graham Brown, and his free wheel seems to have gone, or his chain is off, So that is very unlucky for Graham Brown. These conditions today would have suited his style of sprinting, and he's out of the back and out of the sprint as he approaches the last 6 kilometres of the race.
Well, he must have decked it there. You just saw him looking at his elbow. He probably slid going around that corner. Here's the finishing. That's 1 kilometre to go to the finishing line.
So all of the field in the Giro d'Italia approaching the kilometre, which will impact be 1 lap to go to the finish, making a total of 6 kilometres to race now to the line. The field all together. Moments ago, Graham Brown was left standing on the roadside. He'd slipped his gears, his chain was off. It looked as though it was jammed, and I don't think he'll get back into the pack at all. As they now go out on this finishing circuit, the whole field are together. And Paul's raised the question whether Garzelli will get a time bonus, Bob, and if he does, he'll regain the pink jersey.
He would get the pink jersey back. We didn't think we'd see such a battle for the leader's jersey until the big mountains that begin tomorrow, emphatically climbing the Zoncolan, an unknown climb. We'll see Garzelli and Simoni in full battle tomorrow, but they've really been fighting for that pink jersey. It gives the team so much morale that everybody on the team really wants to fight for the pink jersey. Simoni, however, at this point in the bike race seemed to be a little bit stronger on the climbs than Garzelli, but maybe this bad weather will change the tables again.
Well, here's one of those little corners I was telling you about on the run-up towards the finishing line. It is rather tricky, and the organisers have managed to do that. This is the chicane. They come through here, sort of a left-hand, and follow. There's a crash gone down as well.
There's a crash, again, and one guy gone down is Chirier, the oldest man in the race, and he's taken out Roger L'Huillier of the Française des Jeux team.
Well, it just goes to show that is a very tricky chicane, Phil. We talked about it earlier with 150 metres to go, and you can see this finishing circuit here has caused a serious split. It looks as if he has a problem with his machine. He will not see the front end of the bike race this afternoon, but Cipollini still riding in 5th, 6th position, still got a lot of teammates around him, but as of yet, they still have not organised the train on the front end of the peloton.
Well, this is Glacier, Bob. There is the oldest man in the race there, Mario Scirea, 38 3/4, and a valued man by Cipollini in the lead-out train, left on the circuit now and out of the hunt. He can't help Cipollini over this final lap, and we've already seen also Colombo in trouble as well at the back of the field. Cipollini running out of men here, Bob.
Yes, he will be running out of men, and Matteo Tosato, a very strong bike racer on the Fossa Bortolo team, right on the front of the bike race. He'll be leading out Pataki, and you can see him just on the very right-hand side of the screen there in the purple jersey. That's the Ciclimini points jersey. Fossa Bortolo seems to be now the strongest team in the race. They have 3 guys in the front. Cipollini's men haven't taken over command of the lead-out, and it's all the Fossa Bortolo guys now. I think they've lost their chances for GC because Gonzalez and Frigo have lost so much time, so they're continuing to go for stage wins, and all of them now committed to the chances of Pataki. They have taken over charge of the race, and look at this gap opening up here in the peloton. It looked like Simoni was just tacked onto the back of that, and these are some chasing riders. You can see it's all strung out now. There's the front end of it. It looks like a hornet's nest there going on, and the fighting is for real on all of these wheels now. Very sketchy finishing circuit. Everybody wanting to be in the front, and it's Fossa versus Domina Vacanze with 4 kilometers to go. Cipollini versus Pataki. We haven't seen McEwen recently, but when they pan back, maybe that's him on the far left there, just moving up into the picture there on that all-black special Eddie Merckx bicycle.
Well, I tell you what, this is a very strange sprint now. The weather has affected the riders. They've become a little bit disorganised. Pataki, it's his advantage at the moment. As we look at the boy, watch out for the Pataki rider, because he is in the Ciclamino jersey as points leader. He desperately wants to get another win. He's had a great start in the opening week with 3 stage wins. Cipollini taking care of him in this part of the second week so far. McEwen is still down there.
Well, look at this organisation right now. It's the 2 big teams of the sprinters getting themselves organised into a line. There's almost a drag race between Fossa Bortolo on the right-hand side and Domina Vacanze on the left-hand side. For the moment, advantage going to Fossa Bortolo. Let's remind ourselves of this team. What a great team it is for Alessandro Pataki. The 2 big leaders, Frigo and Gonzalez, a long way down, but he has got Tosato in there. And in fact, it looks as if one of the Fossa riders went round a corner there, Phil, and accelerated slightly, and has got himself a slight lead over the main peloton.
Yeah, that's Kim Kirsch, our little friend from Luxembourg here, but he's pulled away from the field rather than set the pace. He's become the carrot here, as the cavalry right behind are led by Domina Vacanze. Graham Brown, unfortunate and really unlucky there to be washed out before the circuit began. That's Julian Wynne, the champion of Great Britain there. He's a brave man getting mixed up with Domina Vacanze.
Well, Magnus Backstedt might want another crack at the sprint here. He will be trying to lead Magnus Backstedt out. Got 4th the other day. Very good sprinting, and Fact is doing great. Julian Wynne mixing it up in the front of the bike race.
Well, the sprint, Phil, has got to be done for that little corner at 150 metres to go. I think the man who goes around there first and doesn't fall off is the man who's going to win the bike race. And the big advantage these men have at 2 kilometres to go is they have seen that final little chicane, and they will know, and they will try and make sure that Lombardi can get Mario Cipollini into that corner, hopefully in 1st or 2nd position. One more little chicane. It is very slippery out here.
These are treacherous conditions now. When the riders put the brakes on, because of the film of water on the rim, they'll actually get the impression they're going faster rather than slower until they clear off that little skid pan on the brake rims. But right now, these are the riders trying to finish it off for the big sprinters. The teammates of Mario Cipollini still have control.
Well, Robbie McEwen very frisky there. You can see in 1:31, he's onto the wheel of Mario Cipollini. Alongside him there is Pataki. Galvez, the Kelme rider there, 101. He's also moving up to the front, as is Bob's favourite rider there, Angelo Furlan. We haven't seen him too much to the front in the sprints right now, but he's the one taking up the line of Mario Cipollini. Tenax on the attack. This may well cause confusion.
Well, it will to me, because I haven't a clue who the rider is. He's just shot off to the left of the road there, but you see they're all fighting for Cipollini's wheel, and that always gives you a chance to go for something yourself. This rider is in fact Vastier, the rider who crashed.
Good move for Martin Vastier, very strong bike rider, but inside of 1 kilometre to go right now. They did not at all panic, the men from Mario Cipollini's team. They organised themselves, they pulled him back slowly but surely. Right now they have to take over the pacemaking on the front end of the field. Vastier slipping back down the main field. Mario Cipollini is up into third position there. You can see Pataki behind him, very nervous indeed, looking onto his wheel. He can see that Angulo Furlan is there as well. This is going to be a rip-roaring finish again. Eisel getting himself a bit involved there in the argy-bargy at the front end of the main peloton.
As they approach, though, the crucial corner is this, where they will take out some of the riders. They've got to take the risks now. There is one man left on the front to lead out Mario Cipollini. The vital bend is coming up. Cipollini isn't waiting for the Ken. He's had to go over the top of Lombardi because the attack has started on the other side of the road. Galvez really didn't want to be there. McEwen is the first round of it. Galvez, Cipollini have gone one after another. Riders gone. Robbie McEwen has won the stage now for sure. He's clear of the field as one after another on that desperately dangerous corner. The riders slip. Furlan is down as well. All of the sprinters went, and our cameras didn't stay with the leader. So I'm pretty sure, Paul, that McEwen will have stayed clear.
This is Mario Cipollini on the deck, brought down there. He was going to get around that corner safely. It was Galvez taking the risks. He came underneath Mario Cipollini and took him out. There is Furlan. He too was very much to the front. A few words I would think in Spanish there of
well, I don't think Cipollini can blame. I don't think Cipollini can shout at Galvez for that. I mean, you're coming off a highly dangerous corner, made slick. Robbie McEwen, here he is, wonders what happened to the rest of the race. He'll get his own time for the day as well, as McEwen gets stage win number 2. Pataki crosses the line there in second place. Well, that was on the cards from day one, wasn't it, Bob?
Yes, absolutely. Very sketchy finish. And to put this turn in to the finishing stretch is a horrible idea by the organizers. Just
Bob,
absolutely
I have to
bad.
say, McEwen is probably the finest bike handler in the circuit at the moment. He was an BMX rider. He can do things on bikes that no one else can do.
Well, he jumped into, before that corner when everybody else was on the brakes. It was an unbelievable move. It came by the cameras really quickly. We hardly got a chance to see it. But McEwen getting around that corner, Galvez going even slower than McEwen, coming down and taking Cipollini out with him.
Well, I'm not too happy with the way Cipollini's holding his left shoulder there. I hope he hasn't broken his collarbone, because he's not at all happy. He went down well. Let's have a look at the crash here again. Galvez is the first to go on the inside, and he took out Cipollini, but Cipollini really did ram into that barrier. He was having a cushion on top of Galvez at the time, but in the end, the McEwen holds his bike upright and gets his second stage win. Wow, what a finish. We'll take a break, come back, and we'll update you completely. And welcome back. The 11th stage has just ended, and I think it's fair to say in chaos. As we see here, Galvez go off first, taking out the world champion Cipollini. The bike handling skills of McEwen gets him clear. Furlan hits the dust too, and the riders come into the barriers one after another. It's worth noting, though, Bob, that Pataki didn't fall, and he got second.
Pataki was able to get through there cleanly on the wheel of perhaps the best bike handler in the business today, Robbie McEwen, a real acrobat of the wheels. I bet his tires are sliding right there. Cipollini and Galvez, no way they could make that turn at that speed. Cipollini's only consolation was that when he was sliding across the deck, he was right on top of Lopez, and both of them into the barriers there. Very tough finishing circuit. You've got to ask yourself why the promoters put a corner in 150 meters to go on a stage that's dead flat. It's just absolutely unbelievable, and there's some culpability there. The promoters of the Giro d'Italia have got to be a little bit more considerate of what's going to happen in a sprint like that. You know that about 10 guys are going to be going flat out for the line like madmen. You can't have a corner. Even in the dry, it would have been disastrous, I think.
Well, I thought it was a gentle bend in the dry, but it was certainly a very nasty corner in the wet. They're falling like cards here, one after another. They're going down. Just take a look at the faces. There's Lombardi on the far right, just looking at his fallen captain and hoping he was okay. He was clearly stunned too by the speed of the impact of Cipollini. He was having a cushion ride until he hit the barriers, Paul, and then he just shot up in the air.
Cipollini there, Phil, had absolutely no chance at all. I actually think Cipo would have got round the corner himself, but in fact the Spanish rider Galvez just took his wheels from underneath him, and this, I think, for once a rather strange look. Although there's no surprise in the winner, Robbie McEwen, at the top of the leaderboard. He really did get round that corner perfectly. Alessandro Pateki did do well to get round the accidents in front of him, Phil, to get second, and Crescenzo D'Amori in third place. Well, I've not seen his name at the front end of the sprints very often.
No, but Tenax deserved the result today after the two men led the race all of the way. But I'll tell you what, the one reason that Robbie McEwen won today, he's the best bike handler in the world. He can really ride his bike, Bob.
It's fantastic to see these BMX riders. It reminds me a little bit of Johnny Tomac. He was a BMX rider, then a mountain bike champion. He came onto the 711 team as a road racer, and he could produce absolutely magical things on a bicycle. Robbie McEwen the same way. Fantastic field sprinter, but also tremendous balance. The fast twitch reaction time, just incredible. And I think his tires must have been sliding around that last corner. The two riders right on his wheel, both going down Cipollini and Galvez, and just a free ride to the finish line. But his team did a great job to keep him up in the front throughout the lead out by both Fossa Bortolo and the Domino Vacanze team. Robbie McEwen, it was a great sprint, but he is the best bike handler, and that's what won the day today. And I think if it was dry, I do believe he would have won the sprint anyways.
He was well lined up for it, in fairness, but my goodness me, McEwen didn't falter on that bend. And don't forget, Pataki too stayed upright, and they were all falling around him at the time because he was coming up that fourth wheel. Anyway, let's have a look at the route tomorrow. There could be rain tomorrow too, but there'll be no dangerous corner at the finish because we climb to the finish tomorrow. The Zoncolana, a climb never used in the race before, will take the riders to a high spot and the second mountain finish. And I must say that this one could well introduce the riders to what the real mountains are about. Take a look at the far right. Nice gentle start, and then it's steadily uphill as we make our way towards the finish. And the Zoncolan is as bad as it looks. And the riders in this year's Giro d'Italia will know that once again the race is back on. There's the profile for you, up to 1,730 metres. Well, tomorrow we'll be live at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Let's hope Mario Cipollini is back in the race. I'm a little bit worried about the fact he was holding his left shoulder after that crash, and I'm sure that the doctor will have a look at him as soon as this stage is wrapped up. Marco Pantani, he could be in the action again tomorrow because he says he's getting better every day and building up his resistance, and I think he's having a very good tour for a man trying to make a comeback. All of the information we'll keep you up to date on our website, which is olmtv.com. Come and join us, have a surf, and learn all you need to know about the Giro d'Italia. Well, it was a surprising day in the end, not one we like to commentate on, but it did show the bike skills of one Australian, Robbie McEwen. I know back home in Queensland they'll be delighted at his second stage win of the Tour. And he would have got 3 if he hadn't been disqualified from the other one he won very early on when he outsprinted Pataki. Anyway, well, I hope you're enjoying the coverage. We certainly are. For Bob Roll and for Paul Sherwen, I'm Phil Liggett saying, we'll see you tomorrow at 9:30. We're back in the mountains. And by the way, let's hope the clouds stay away, because that could make for some very difficult cycling. Until tomorrow then at 9:30, it's goodbye for now. Rides well up in 6th place. Rumsas is there, 3rd in last year's Tour de France. Marco Velo completing the top 10. In the other notables, Marco Pantani. What secrets does this man hold? Will it be today when we'll see him find his wings again? Gonzalez is the leader in the King of the Mountains. He sits there in 30th place. Today there will be a big reshuffle on the classification. And Paul, you're going to tell us why.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If I was looking at this race profile today, I wouldn't be a very happy bike rider. And I'm sure 1 or 2 riders in the field will be very scared about what's in store this afternoon. Certainly not the climbers, though. It's 185 kilometre the stage today as the riders leave where they finished from yesterday, Sandone di Piave, all the way to Monte Zoncolan. I think the most important thing, though, is to have a quick look at the profile, because that is what will cast fear into the hearts of many of today's bike riders. Fairly flat for the first 120 kilometres, and then they hit the Fuesa, a difficult climb which goes up to an altitude of 1,100 metres, just over 3,000 feet. But it's this climb at the end, Phil, which really is the big brute. 13.3 kilometres, 27% grade in certain parts. It's going to be a brute.
Well, we're looking now at pictures here of the leader on the road today. There's the time gaps for you. Marzio Brusagin is leading. He's been away for quite a while by himself. 2 minutes 5 ahead of a chase group of 10. And now we can look at the main field there with the pink jersey. The main field itself, frankly, is only about 30 riders strong. We're about 37 kilometres from the finish. And in fact, as well, 30 kilometres for the leader now. And they are doing this at an amazing speed. We're averaging 40 kilometres an hour despite the climbs. And of course, the big mountain is going to take the best part of 40 minutes to climb. But the breakaway of 10 riders is not closing in anymore on Marzio Brusagin. and 2:05. In fact, they're beginning to lose a little bit of ground now. There was an earlier breakaway which he caught and dropped on the climb of Fuesa, where he went over the top alone ahead of Freddy Gonzalez. We're sorry about the occasional drop in the picture here. It's a problem outside of our control with the pictures from Italy. But we're looking at a chase group, and there is Pietro Cauchioli, third overall in the race last year, and the first time we've really seen him on the attack. There's the composition of the chasing 10. The best place rider is Vladimir Belli. He's in 12th place, 4 minutes 23 back. But the main peloton are waiting, I think, for the big climb before they pounce. Now there's a race update for you. We're down to 155 riders because Cipollini didn't start, along with Galvez Lopez. Tirolongo, who rode so well a couple of days ago, crashed out, I'm afraid, as indeed did Moreni, and Aggiano also abandoned. So that means only 10 of the 19 teams are now intact. 169 at the start originally. We're down to 155. Beautiful day, Paul, and in the far distance is where we're going to the Zoncolan.
For the first time for many of these bike riders, except the big challengers for the overall victory, because many of them came during the winter months to try and see what it was like. And in fact, many of them having difficulty because the race route was covered in snow till only about 6 weeks ago. It is fabulous, the weather today, Phil, compared with what happened yesterday. And I think we're going to have an unbelievable festival of cycling here on the slopes of the Monte Zoncolan. Rather strange to see this man, Bruchegin, on the attack, because he's been a professional for many years, but he's never actually won himself a bike race.
No, which we're always surprised about because he is such a very good cyclist, but he plays his part well as a team man, and that could be what he's doing today, laying the foundation for his big names like Frigo to come out and fight later on. Well, we'll follow the riders to the summit now, and we'll take our first break. Come back soon as we head for the big mountain. And welcome back, and we're looking down here on the main field. Basically, it's Eddie Mazzolini getting back here with a teammate after a flat tyre as he comes back through the cars. The leader, Bruchegin, on the left of our picture, is just about on the slopes now of the second category climb of the Sella Valcalda, Bob, and this is the stepping stone up to the finish.
Yes, this is the second to last climb out of 3 big mountain passes on the day. Bruchegin is a handy little bike racer. He's been a pro for a while. He's out on a good breakaway. He's got about 3.5 minutes behind the peloton, which being led by the red train of Gilberto Simoni. That's Fabio Sacchi right on the front of the group there, and Fornaciari, perhaps his teammate. So you can see all those red jerseys from Saeco doing what they're paid to do, what they do so well, and that will be making the tempo for Gilberto Simoni. You'll see him in the pink jersey just at the end of this red line, and they are going really fast. There's some danger men up in the breakaway, especially Vladimir Belli, a very good climber himself. They need to close this down a little bit more before they get to the slopes of the Zoncolan if Simoni's going to have a chance to sweep him up on the road.
Well, just to reset it for you, there's one rider, Marzio Bruchegin, out in front. There's a group of 10 chasing at 2 minutes and 24 seconds, and the main pink jersey bunch is at 3.5 minutes. And this now is a reaction coming from that pink jersey bunch. The Kelme boys have been very active today. Gonzalez also on the attack as he got second place over the Fuesa climb, which keeps him in the lead in the King of the Mountains. And his nearest rival there, Constantin Tino Zabala, he was over there just behind him, but took the inferior points. There's the actual composition of the chase group. And as Bob has said, the most dangerous man here is Vladimir Belli, Paul, and we remember him being disqualified a couple of years ago from this event.
Yes, I think it was a rather unfortunate decision because the crowds were going absolutely mad on that stage, and they were shouting and jeering at all the bike riders. And in fact, he punched one of Gilberto Simoni's relatives, who was a spectator at the side of the road, on the nose. And unfortunately for him, the helicopter was right up above, and he was booted out of the race. And if my memory serves me correctly, he was third overall at the time. So he's no mean bike rider, and I think today he'll be looking to put himself a little bit higher in the overall classification. The fact that he's in this group, Bob, is rather good for Francesco Casagrande, because it takes the pressure off the Lampre squad, who have got 3 very good men with the possibility of moving up high in the overall classification. Both
Rumsauce and Casagrande riding quite well in the Giro so far. A little bit of trouble for Casagrande on the first big mountain pass of the Giro d'Italia, the Terminilio, in the first week of the bike race. Now this is a whole nother part of the bike race. We're already halfway through. Fatigue is starting to come into the legs of the whole peloton, and it's your ability to recover day after day that'll make the big difference, as well as climbing. Casagrande, Rumsauce, great climbers, and Simoni has proved to be the strongest of them all so far.
Well, Bruce again here, in fact, has been a professional since about 1998, and we get a chance to see there's a classification over the summit of the Fuesa. He got maximum points there ahead of Freddy Gonzalez and Constantino Zabaya. So still, once again, for Gonzalez, Bob, extending his advantage in that competition. And on a day like this, if he can stay off the front when we come to the Monte Zancolan, which is where we're going right now, he's got a very good chance of laying some serious foundations for victory in the best climber competition.
Yes, if he can get second place points on this climb that they're on right now, the Valcaldo, he'll have a huge commanding lead, although Zavaya is chasing him all the way up each one of these mountains, has finished just behind him on a number of them, and it's a really good battle between those two for the King of the Mountain competition. These are real mountains, and it's nice to see that they're still getting points, not just the points on the smaller categories, and they're both doing a good job in the King of the Mountain competition. Here's one of the men that is the biggest question mark perhaps in the whole bike race, Marco Pantani. We're going to see if he can get back to the level that we are used to seeing him, which is right at the front on the big mountain climbs. He suffered a lot on the Terminillo. He didn't lose that much time. I thought he did a great ride when you consider how little racing he's done in the last few seasons. So we might see the Pantani of old come back into the bike race, or this is a make or break day for Pantani. He's got to get a good result. Not great, but at least decent. Be up there in the top 10 or top 15 riders to carry on.
Looking here once again, this man really ploughing a lone furrow on this stage today. He leads the chasing group by about 2.5 minutes, and the main field under the control of Gilberto Simone's Saeco Cannondale team are doing an excellent job setting this up for what is going to be a real shake-up in the overall classification today. And as Bob has said, Phil, this climb that we go to at the end is definitely the kind of climb that would suit the pure climbers. It's very difficult to come to a climb of this kind of gradient and climb it on absolute and utter power.
And the gears they're fitting today are quite ridiculous in many people's eyes, but a 28-tooth back sprocket. If you could just explain the gear mechanism for those viewers who don't probably understand cycling that well, Paul.
Well, they really are huge gears and huge sprockets they're putting on the back, Phil.
Okay, we'll discuss that a little bit more later on as we watch the riders heading up towards the top here now of the Sella Valcaldo. No doubt who the winner will be. It'll be Brusegin, but the field are closing in. We'll take a break. And as you rejoin us, the clock stops at 2 minutes and 53 seconds with 25 kilometres to go. And that is for the pink jerseyed group of Gilberto Simone. For the leader, though, that's right, he's about a kilometre up the road towards the finish. Brusegin leads 10 chasers by exactly 1.5 minutes.
Well, he's got a big advantage over the chasers, but I think once he gets to the slopes of the Zoncolan, as they say in cycling terms, the man with the big hammer is going to land a very heavy blow on his head, Bob, because that really is a brute of a climb. Looking there at Marco Pantani, yes, big question mark on him today as to whether or not he will show us the climbing abilities that he had of old. He's 14th overall in the classification, which when you consider, Bob, what he's been through over the last couple of years, is not a bad position to be in.
No, that's quite a good effort so far by Pantani. We'll see if he can climb well today. Today will really tell the tape. Here's the Valcalda, the climb they're on currently right now, 6.6 kilometers long, average grade of 6.1%. I think the steepest is about 12%. It's not a very steep or very long mountain. Has a good category though. Freddy Gonzalez is in the second group. You can see that they are the peloton 253 behind Brusegin, and he's being followed by about 10 guys, including Freddy Gonzalez, the green jerseyed king of the mountain for the Colombia Italia team. He's chasing some more points along with Zavea, and you can see they're closing in on some of the riders that have been dropped from that breakaway. It looks like the Formaggi Pint Solo rider and the Adayev from the Landbau Credit Colnago team coming back into the peloton now under a really strong effort by the Saeco team. 4 or 5 guys on the Saeco team at the front of the peloton. You can see them there in the red. They've dropped a couple of their teammates already who made a huge effort across the flats between the first and the second climb. Now they're climbing up these slopes of the second climb. They'll drop down and then start the arduous, very difficult Zoncolan. It's a climb we don't know anything about. We've never seen the Giro go up that, but we're going to see it for the first time today. And from all the reports that we've received, it's a real beast of a hill.
Well, we did report to you at the start of our programme there was points on that climb at 27%. Now, that is not in any of the official material coming off from the race, but we've spoken to the riders out there, and they have said that it kicks for how long, Paul, at 27%?
For 27%, it kicks up at about 80 metres in length. That's about 100 yards, and that's at 1.5 kilometres to go, so just a mile to go. It really is quite horrendous, the climb that these riders will be facing. It's a very difficult race route today, and as you can see in the first part of the course, Phil, it's totally flat for about 120 kilometres. This is the climb that we've been over already, the Fuesa, and that's just really the hors d'oeuvre, because the order of the day comes right at the end there on this climb, which is around about 9 miles in length. And that's just up towards the summit there that it kicks up to 27%, which is unbelievable. In fact, a lot of riders, Phil, have taken special precautions today with the gearings that they've used. The gearings are along the route very often these days with 10-speed bicycles, in fact, are very often the same from the start to finish, but for today they've in fact put on some very strange gears that maybe you would normally see on a mountain bike, not on a road bike. And just a quick resume of some of the top men. For example, Simoni and Pantani are using a chainring on the front that only has 39 teeth, and at the back has a 28-tooth sprocket, and I think that is absolutely remarkable. In fact, Gilberto Simoni was so worried about the weather conditions, Phil, that he actually has a spare bike on the car behind with a triple chainring, which we very rarely see used in these kind of races.
I've got one on my bike.
A triple can help a guy out. I don't know if a triple would help me climb the Zone Colando. I think I might need the funicolare, the cabled ski lift that you use to get to the top. Forget about the bicycle for today. You have to be such a fit and superior athlete to climb that. And the gears that they're using, although relatively speaking, they're very small that they'll use for this, it's a huge gear for anybody else to turn over on the final climb of the day.
Well, the peloton now know the gaps, as they were shown there by the blackboard man, who will now zoom up to the leaders and tell him as well. Bruce Gini went over the Fuesa on his own, 27 seconds ahead of Freddy Gonzalez, and then came Zabala. The pink jersey peloton were 2 minutes behind over the top of the Fuesa. Now, as we are about a kilometre away from the summit of the Sella Valcalda for the leader, the peloton are riding at about 2 minutes and 53 seconds. So they're holding but not gaining at the moment. This man is on a mission, that is for sure. They won't be too worried about him, but they will certainly be worried about Vladimir Belli, who is in that chase group at 1.5 minutes, because if Vladimir Belli can get to the lowest slopes of the big finishing climb, he might well stay away.
He's got a very good chance of moving high up in the overall classification. This is a brilliant ride by this man, Bruchegin, who I think today really is trying to get himself a certain amount of publicity for the team, because the two big leaders, I think, have collapsed in their ability to win this bike race. I think, Phil, we're about 2 kilometres from the summit of this penultimate climb of the day, and this now is a chance to see the counter-attackers, and Vladimiro Belli is there in the blue and pink jersey of the Lampre squad. Just joining him on the far side there is Garcia. So, Bob, this is a pretty dramatic move here by Belli to go so early on.
Well, they were right with Freddy Gonzalez just a little while ago, and he's been dropped from this chase group. They're trying to come back across to Bruce again before the top of this. Then the three of them will sweep down the descent and then straight up the Zone Colon. But it looks like Freddy Gonzalez went with Belli, but he couldn't maintain the tempo, and now he's been dropped. So in his race for the King of the Mountains jersey is starting to slip away from him a little bit.
Well, just on 1.5 kilometres, you may have seen the 2 kilometre sign flash by there as Bruce Sejima is making his progress. This is a nice little counter-attack that's coming at him now for Adolfo Garcia and Vladimir Belli. Meanwhile, back in the comparative comfort of the peloton down there's Francesco Casagrande. No, it's not. It's his teammate down there, number 117, Rumzas, riding, I think, on the wheel of Casagrande. Now, this is, I think we're coming up to the summit of the climb here, although I'm not too sure whether that's the kilometre to go. I don't see any countdown boards to the line. So this isn't the summit of the climb, this is on the way to the summit, but the road is beginning to flatten out. There's no doubt that Bruchegin is going to stay away to win the climb, as he did the Fuesa, but whether he stays away to win the day, I highly doubt it. As Paul Sherwen has said, he hasn't won a race in his career, although he's a very, very strong bike rider. So as they continue on the climb then of the Sella Valcalda, once we get over the top, we'll have covered 163 of the 185 kilometres, and these two boys are trying to get on terms. And as they make a big effort, we'll take a break, come back and rejoin us for all of the action. 100 feet is watching 3 riders here approach the summit of the Sella Valcalda, and as we switch to the front, just in time to see Marzio Brusagin go over the top of this climb in first place. The 3 chasers are closing in on him though. Time to zip up his racing jersey for the plunge down, but very shortly he's going to be on the dreaded slopes of the Zoncolan. Could be an interesting place for sprint for second place here, Paul.
It should be. The man at the back there wearing number 32 is the man who wants to get maximum points here. They're in fact closing in all of the time on the lone leader, and so is the main peloton as well. Just getting out of the saddle, Freddy Gonzalez here. You can see the acceleration. No response at all for the others, and I think that's going to put a nice number of points into his back pocket, Bob.
Yes, absolutely. He was dropped for a while during the climb when Belli made his acceleration. This is a great move by Freddy Gonzalez because Zebea is not with this group, so he will get second place. Zebea only, at this point anyways, capable of getting 5th place in that little sprint there. So because Belli and Garcia are in between Freddy Gonzalez and Zebea, that is a lot of points in the King of the Mountain competition. And the way it's structured in the Giro d'Italia, these smaller climbs giving as much or sometimes
as much, yeah,
as much points credit for even the big mountains that they finish on top of. So Freddy Gonzalez has that competition well in hand.
This is the peloton. They're about 500 meters from the finish line of that climb, and looks like Zabala is dropping back there because the breakaway that was in between of 10 riders has totally disintegrated now. Bo Hamburger is already back, so too Sergei Adveyev. Those riders caught by the pack here. So they're picking them off one by one. The gap was 46 seconds, Gonzalez, so they've halved their deficit, those 3, once they got away from those remaining 10 riders. Up with the leader now. Nice little piece of downhill riding now. He's been sending very well actually today, but he has the advantage of being on his own, which is a huge advantage. Unfortunately, there was a crash on the very early descent of the before we got to the Fuese, and we lost Paolo Tiralongo and Christian Mareni, both out with injuries. So we've lost 3 riders on the road today. Elio Aggiano went very early on. He just abandoned as far as we know.
Hard to imagine the day was going to be like this, though, Phil, after that unbelievable rainstorm the riders had to go through yesterday. And that's probably actually what cleared the air here in the mountains, but it certainly hasn't cleared the satellite link-up, which is what we're having a few problems with at the moment. You can see the main field, though, coming up, and they've actually clawed back a certain amount of their deficit, coming over the top of that King of the Mountains with 2.5 minutes in arrears. The descent of this climb is around about 7 kilometers, and then after that, it really is all uphill to the finish, and that final climb of the day, Phil, I reckon is going to take these guys around about 45 to 50 minutes. It's an unbelievable brute of a climb, and really it's difficult towards the top, because at the top it kicks up to 27%. Here's confirmation of the King of the Mountains competition there. Brusagin getting himself 5 points, Gonzalez 3, and then just getting across in 3rd place there, well, for 1 point was in fact I think it was the Colombian got 3rd.
Yeah, Garcia, Adolfo Garcia it was, and not Zabala, his teammate, which was the rider who really wanted to be 3rd because he's running Gonzalez pretty close in that competition, but he's lost a bit of ground. Now we do the twists and the turns. 2:35 they're saying is now the official time gap back to the pink jersey leader Gilberto Simoni in the main field, but they're looking to try and pick up Vladimir Belli, who is riding now in a group of 3, just 46 seconds behind the leader. Here they are as they also plunge down the mountain. Well, very shortly we are going to be on the big one, and boy, don't miss it. It's going to be something very special. We'll take a break. We're back with the leader now in the Giro d'Italia, a composition of riders which have just got themselves together chasing him. So Cauchioli, 3rd in this race last year, has rejoined the chase group. He was in it, he was left behind, he's got back. Here we are, chance to see them. Freddy Gonzalez, he's certainly yo-yoing today, Bob. He's been up there 1 minute and back the next.
Well, I don't think he wanted to cover the move by Belli, but he had to get the King of the Mountain points. He's getting some direction there from the sports director, telling him to stay in the front, try to get some more points at the finish, maybe explaining him a little bit that the climb climb is coming up directly, and to stay in that group right now, it was kind of a surprise that guys like Cauchioli and Cassar would be dropped on that climb, but Belli must have put in a huge effort. Maybe some of the riders were sitting on and he wanted to get a little bit up the road and not be towing them across the flat valley here before the final climb. But they're going to be up on the slopes of the Zone Colon here in just a couple of kilometers, and it is really coming up to a full boil, and it looks like they might be coming across to Bruseguin there at the minute. It seems like the Fossil Bortolo rider, oh no, that's Sandy Cassar, excuse me. So this is the chasers still following. Here's the peloton coming through, 15 kilometers to go now. The last climb is 13 Ks, so they'll be getting onto the slopes of that in just a short while. And it's still Saeco doing all the work on the front of the bike race, trying to get their man Gilberto Simoni into a perfect spot at the bottom of the climb so he can really dynamite the field there. They're all queued up on his wheel. He's taking the helmet off. That's allowed now. Giving it to the motorcycle cop there. Hopefully he'll deliver it to the team car. That was a cheeky little move there. The bike riders will never be at a loss for improvising. That's one of the beauties of the sport, and you always got to be thinking on your pedals, as they say.
Well, just to come back to the helmet rule, which has just come in, because in fact it is now mandatory to wear helmets in all major races, except when it's on a finishing climb of a stage or a race when the finishing climb is in excess of 5 kilometers. Well, it certainly is today. It's 13.5 kilometers, and there's a little problem here between Vladimiro Belli, and he's the kind of man who in the past has not been opposed to a little punch-up, Bob.
Well, he's a very combative, aggressive bike racer. You have to be at this level, and he's asking the other two riders, why would they go in a breakaway with him if they're not going to work? They're caught between the peloton and the leader, Bruseguin, so they have to cooperate with each other. The other two riders don't want to help Belli at all, so I think that's why you saw a little bit of a regrouping there in the second group on the road, and those 10 chasers coming together right behind this rider, Marzio Bruseguin, our lone leader in the slopes, the early slopes of the Zone Colon climb.
Yes, Marzio Bruseguin is just about on the first slopes of the climb. Remember, it's a 13-kilometer climb. And welcome back. The Zone Colon has just begun for the riders, and it's beginning to bite already. 12 kilometers to climb now to the finishing line. Vladimir Belli here has got clear of the rest of the 7 men and is trying to go ahead alone. Now, he is a good climber, and he is also an exciting carrot for Gilberto Simoni, Gozzelli, Casagrande, etc. behind, because overall this man has only lost so far 4 minutes and 23 seconds.
It's a great move tactically for the Lampre squad, because what it means is in the group behind, Francesco Casagrande and Raimundas Rumsas will not have to do any pacemaking at all, and all of the pressure on the attack will be put onto the shoulders of the man who leads this bike race, Gilberto Simoni. And this is rather strange to see at the back. This is looks very much to me as if it's Gonzalez, Phil, once again, the man who last year was a winner of the Vuelta a España, in serious difficulties on the next climb of the day.
Yes, he's a little bit down on the general classification, but these are the 6 leaders of the Tour at the moment. 2 seconds to Gozzelli, 56 seconds to Noe. They've got to ride side by side up this mountain, that's for sure. Pelazzotti always rides well in this race, and he's lying 4th. So too for Tonkov. Even though he gets older, he's still a top 6 contender, look. And Popovic, at 23 years of age, what will he do today? Will the stamina be in the body for him to do a climb like he did a few days ago on the Terminillo? And there, just take a look at the back sprockets. Now, for those of you who know about cycling, will probably have never seen a sprocket that large at the back, because that's the lowest gear. It's a 28-tooth sprocket, which will mean that once your chain goes onto that large sprocket, it's easier to pedal, but because of the gradients, Bob, I doubt they'll be throwing it over more than once every 10 meters or so.
It's going to be an incredible steep climb to the finish. We're going to see the smallest gears of the year, perhaps. The Angliru climb in the Volta a España, very similar on the profile, and that just kicks up like crazy at the end. And the winner of that stage, Roberto Eras, using a triple chainring on his bike, which you see on mountain bikes where you climb super steep grades. This is a similar gradient, but it's paved, so the Giro d'Italia has brought the race here this year. First chance for us to look at this climb, and we're going to see the type of fireworks that it's going to provide. Looks like the Mercatoni Uno team is on the front, and there's Marco Pantani with the helmet off, much more easily recognized, and the Saeco riders are still in there, and Gilberto Simoni is just waiting to pounce.
Well, they're on the way up the climb. By the way, the steepest climb I can recall is in Cornwall in southwest England, and that was 33%, and you were standing up and you were almost touching the road with your nose. That was quite steep. Anyway, this is where the race is going to fragment now. The pressure is going on. The strong men of the Giro have to now come to grips with the race. Sorry about the blackness, but when we come back, we will have extended coverage of the climb of the Zoncolan. We'll just take a quick break. And just 30 seconds ago, we're looking here at the pass being made by Vladimiro Belli as he comes up against the race-long leader today, Marzio Brusagin. And now we are really every man for himself on this climb, Paul, because it's just how well can you climb right now?
It's really, on a climb like this, it's just a question of survival. It's interesting to note that Marco Pantani's team have been very aggressive in setting the pacemaking on the front end of this. In second position, you can see Stefano Garzelli, the man who led this race a short while ago. As we look further down the slopes, there's an awful lot of damage already being done. Just to remind ourselves, Phil, this climb is 13 kilometers in length. That's around about 8.5 miles. This is the lone leader for the moment, Vladimiro Belli. Been a professional for an awful long time. In fact, he turned professional back in 1992. And I think the biggest thing we remember him for is for that punch that he threw on one of the climbs in the early part of the 2001 Giro, and he was kicked out while he was third in the overall classifications. This, as we look, is the race route this afternoon, and what a climb it is, 5,676 feet. The average gradient is 9%, and in the last kilometre it's at 22%, but I think what really strikes the fear into every bike rider's heart is at about 1.5 kilometres to go, Phil, the maximum gradient is 27%. It really is a brute of a climb.
It's one of those rare climbs, really, that gets steeper when you get to the top. Largely they level out a bit, but this actually gets steeper.
It's a horrendous climb. We're looking down here. We get a chance to see this is Dario Frigo going off the back of the group. In fact, it's not a one-way climb either, Phil. There is a road that goes over the top, although the descent for the moment is very precarious and dangerous, and it involves a tunnel. And there are rumours that they might upgrade that road so that the Giro d'Italia could come up to this part of Italy again in the future. We are, let's not forget, up in the northeastern part of Italy, right on the Austrian border.
Yeah. Beautiful part of the world, as you can see, and thank heavens there are blue skies over the riders today, not the dark ones we had running into Faenza yesterday. It would have been real problems up here because it would have been extremely cold as well, of course. There is the lone leader. It's a move which I think has been planned today because this is a man on the team of Raimundus Rumsas and Casagrande, both the candidates for a high finish in Milan, and Belli has been told to go out front and see what he can do because he's in such a good position that if the plan works, then he could take over the race lead, Bob.
Yes, he could definitely get some more time towards the race lead. He is still a little bit over 4 minutes down on GC, and it looks like Casagrande and Simoni themselves will probably sweep up that deficit. They won't give him that much room probably, and the chase will be on. You can see that's Brusagin down there, and Belli has caught and passed him. Going out the back is Brusagin's teammate. That would be Dario Frigo, one of our pre-race Giro favorites. He is not having a good Giro so far. He was dropped on the Terminillo. He's dropped again now on the Zoncolan. He's going to lose big time today, although he's fighting hard to get back into the group. And Paul, isn't that what you have to do on a climb like this? Maybe initially you don't feel so strong, but your legs always have a chance to come around and feel better towards the end of it. I don't know if that's going to happen for Frigo today, but he's got to fight back and try to find a rhythm and climb well. There is a star of last year's Giro, Julio Perez, and look at Marco Pantani, still hanging tough. He's got his teammate on the front of the bike race now. You can see that they're making a very good tempo, the Mercatone Uno riders are, and that's a great ride by Pantani so far. That's something that we didn't think we would see, is his team back at the front of a big climb in a Grand Tour, and Pantani right at the head of the affairs there with Gilberto Simoni.
Well, there's Christian Gasparoni on the front doing all the pacemaking for Marco Pantani. In second place there's Stefano Garzelli, and it is very important if you're a non-climber to basically, Phil, ride these climbs at a tempo which is comfortable to yourself, because the climbers like Garzelli, like Simoni and like Marco Pantani have an unbelievable habit and knack to be able to accelerate and slow down and accelerate and slow down, and that's what really kills the riders who climb these mountains with strength.
Vladimir Belli, who really could be altering the destiny of the pink jersey if he continues to climb like this. But let's face it, although in distance it's only about 9 kilometers to the summit, that in time is probably more than half an hour to go yet on this mountain road. This is possibly the hardest climb of this year's Giro, and they are saying by the time it's over we're going to talk about it for a long time. Well, we'll take another short break and then we'll have the long journey to the summit for you, so don't go too far away. Simone may attack yet. Well, moments ago we see the catch here of Brusagian. It was Belly last time, now the peloton, and they've wiped out everybody on the road now between them and the pink jersey. Belly and the pink jersey rather, because little look at the lower down the slopes here. About 7.5 kilometers to climb for the leader, 8 kilometers for the chasing group, and there is the leader on the road, and still this hill hasn't even started by standards which it set itself.
It's a very tough climb. We climb up to the high spot of today's race. Belly has really put a lot of pressure on the group behind, but I have to say one man who's doing an excellent job is Gasparoni, the teammate of Marco Pantani, and I wonder if Marco Pantani, with those clipped-down wings of his, Bob, will be able to do something special today.
We will soon find out. That's Eddie Mazzolini on the wheel of his team captain, our second place on GC rider, Stefano Garzelli, looking very strong and smooth himself today, and Simone looks fabulous. It looks like Frigo might have caught back up and has fought back into the group there. There's still a couple of Fossa Bortolo riders in the peloton. If we can see their numbers real quickly, we can identify them. But if it is indeed Frigo, that is a great ride by him. You can see some of the other riders. That's probably Sandy Cassar there getting dropped. And he was in the breakaway early on, as was Vladimiro Belli, who's gone ahead of the bike race. And that's Massimo Codol, the Mercatoni Uno rider. This is a group that's behind, actually, way behind. There's Gonzalez right there, and there's Simone. And that looks like Eddie Mazzolini and Stefano Garzelli. Casagrandi's there. But Gasparoni's doing a huge effort here. And it looks like those Fossa riders, Gonzalez and Frigo, must have caught back up to the front.
Well, it's like you were saying, Bob, when you get onto a climb like this, don't try and respond to the accelerations of the climbers. Get yourself into a rhythm. Let's not forget those two guys, Frigo and Gonzalez, are very good individual time trialists. They will find a rhythm that suits themselves, because if you go into the red zone on a climb like this, you never are able to come back out of it. The man there looking in very good shape this afternoon is in fact Stefano Garzelli. There's Perez. Perez, by the way, is one of the riders who reputedly has one of the biggest gear ratios on for today's stage. He's riding a 39 tooth sprocket on the